Nathaniel lowered his gaze to the folder, contemplating whether he should inform Arya about the situation with the Comoras and let her know that turning down the case wasn't really an option. Arya had a reputation for taking on challenging cases that other surgeons of her caliber would typically refuse, a legacy that Sebastian Rowan had established over years, and which Arya had further elevated upon joining the team. So receiving this anonymous case might not be unusual for her. "Honey, do you often handle anonymous cases like this?" Nathaniel asked cautiously, hoping to clarify their assumptions. "No, not usually. When a patient is well known and demands the utmost privacy, Dr. Rowan, arranges for a home visit. If hospitalization is necessary, we have a private ward on the top floor with restricted access. That's where Sean Cavalier is, aside from being involved with those people, he is also a well-known fashion photographer," Arya explained. Nathaniel nodded, accepting the explanation with a resigned sigh. "I'll go find out how the guard received the parcel," Jake interjected. Arya looked up, a slight frown creasing her brow. "Why?" she inquired, causing Jake to pause. "For security reasons?" Jake suggested tentatively. Arya dismissed his concern with a wave of her hand. "It's fine, Jake. It's likely someone well-known who wants to remain anonymous. Let's not dwell on it. We have a busy day ahead, and I wouldn't want to delay anything," she added. Nathaniel and Jake exchanged a knowing glance. "Okay, dear. Shall we leave now?" Nathaniel asked. "Yes, baby," she replied. The men watched as she packed the papers back into the folder, moved to place them in one of her chest of drawers, but then sighed and tucked them under her arm instead. Aiden suppressed a smile, observing Nathaniel's raised eyebrows at her actions. She threw him a resigned glance and he chuckled, took the folder from her and handed it to Aiden, who tucked it under his arm. Nathaniel escorted her out of the office with his men stationed beside and behind them. He gave Jake a sidelong glance conveying a silent message. Jake intentionally lagged behind, and as the others exited the building, he hurried to the security office. Pushing the door open, he caught the guard who had delivered the parcel in a heated embrace with a female in scrubs. "Son of..." The man let out a string of expletives as the two sprang apart. The lady lowered her gaze, quickly rearranging her clothes, mumbling something incoherent as she hurried past Jake. The guard glared at Jake, who leaned lazily against the door frame, grinning. "You know there's a door there for a reason," the guard retorted as he made himself decent. "Uh-huh," Jake responded before adding, "The parcel you brought in for Dr. Everly Hawthorne. How did it get here?" The man's brows furrowed. "Is there a problem? Because I promise, I ran it through our advanced scanning system, which includes X-ray imaging and chemical trace detection to check for explosives, hazardous substances, and any other dangerous materials." Jake nodded, impressed, his eyes settling on the name tag. "That's okay, but what I meant was, did someone bring the parcel in personally, or did it come by postal service?" Jake probed. The man's brows furrowed as he took out a recording book and traced the parcel registration. It was by speed post, and it says it came from Nepal, Italy. There was no sender address, though. It only stated the receiver's address, who was Dr. Everly Hawthorne. "That's strange," the man said, then added almost to himself, "I'm pretty sure no postal service will take on a parcel without the sender's address." The Italian postal service, Poste Italiane, typically requires a sender's address. Jake nodded to himself. "Of course, no postal service would accept such a parcel unless they know who sent it," Jake replied, then added, "Thank you, Scott. Next time when you want to have a quick snack in the office, perhaps consider locking the door." Jake fought down a laugh as the guy turned bright red. "Please don't mention this to Dr. Everly Hawthorne, man," he pleaded in a contrite, small voice. Jake winked, cocked his fingers, and made a clicking sound with his mouth before exiting the room, an amused grin lingering on his lips. He then quickened his pace and hurried out of the building to join the waiting jeep. "Sorry, I had to use the restroom," Jake said as he slipped into the front passenger seat. Aiden was now behind the wheel. He could see that Dr. Hawthorne was going through the medical file again, leaning against her husband, a pensive frown forming a groove between her eyebrows. Jake's eyes met Nathaniel's, and he nodded in confirmation. Nathaniel nodded once in acknowledgement before looking away. As Aiden moved the jeep from the parking lot, Jake imagined just how badly the trust in the Cavalier household must have deteriorated for Samuel Cavalier to have sent his parcel to Dr. Hawthorne anonymously by speed post. He had a feeling they were in for a big surprise. Upon reaching the Farmer Hawthorne building, the Jeep pulled to a stop and Jake quickly got out, joined by Will, who opened the back seat door on Nathaniel's side. Nathaniel gave him a subtle nod of gratitude as he exited the car, then turned to offer Aria a hand. For a moment she seemed bemused, and Jake, Aidan and Will stifled their laughter as she threw him a puzzled look. "Do you need me to tag along?" she asked gingerly, thinking if all he wanted to do was to pick up a file, why then did he need her to come with him? "Yes, babe," Nathaniel answered simply. "If you're worried I won't be comfortable waiting, believe me, I'm okay with waiting here," she replied. "Take my hand, Ariana, or I will carry you," Nathaniel responded, his voice low and deep. Aria shot him a vexed gaze. At that moment, she reminded him of their sons. He imagined how adorable a daughter with Aria's features would be. He was certain she would stomp her feet if she could. She reluctantly gave him her hand, continuing to grumble that she was better off in the car. Nathaniel suppressed a chuckle, not wanting her to see him laugh. The fact that any other woman in her position would want to flaunt being Mrs. Hawthorne, yet she shied away from showing up at his work, made her quite special. He never had to worry about her wanting his money. She had been consistent in her attitude that she couldn't care less. You know, for someone who has 25% of Farmer Hawthorne shares, you could show a tiny bit of interest in what we do here. Nathaniel teased softly, whispering close to her ear. Aria froze, causing him to pause in his stride, but he didn't let her linger. He wrapped his arms around her waist, almost half carrying her, ignoring the strain from his gunshot wound to ensure she kept walking. "I have what now?" Aria replied in a hushed tone of agitation. Upon noticing the attention they drew from everyone in the company lobby, who seemed to straighten up as they approached, she swiftly adjusted her expression from surprise to a polite smile. "Nathaniel Hawthorne," she added through gritted teeth. Nathaniel coughed lightly to mask a laugh. "What do you mean by 25%? You told me it was only 5%, she continued. Jake, who was flanking Aria, lowered his gaze, knowing he would laugh if his eyes met Nathaniel's. "Good morning, sir. Good morning, madam," the staff greeted them as they passed by. Upon reaching the elevator and with the doors closing, Aria turned to face Nathaniel, Jake, Aidan, and Will. With her hands on her hips, she fixed a stern gaze on the four. "I have no clue about this, Dr. Hawthorne," Will quickly confessed. "Chicken shit," Aidan muttered quietly. "You're all having a good time, aren't you?" Aria asked, narrowing her eyes, especially at Nathaniel. "Why didn't you tell me about this, baby?" she queried, clearly annoyed. "I wasn't aware either. I found out after my surgery," Nathaniel admitted, finding some amusement in her struggle not to openly panic. "Maybe you should consider attending board meetings and similar events," he suggested with a serious expression. Aria looked like she might cry, but "How, Nathaniel, you told me it was only 5%, she exclaimed, her tone resembling that of a frustrated child. Then she paused, seeming to realize something. "Ugh, this must be Tom's doing, isn't it? Did he increase it because of that meeting I had to attend? Remember, he granted me his power of attorney to act on his behalf too. Goodness, am I still his representative? Nathan!" She stamped her foot in annoyance. Nathaniel couldn't help it. He burst out laughing and drew her into his arms. "Come on! Being involved in running the company can't be that terrible," he joked affectionately. "I prefer people trusting me with their lives as a surgeon rather than with money," she murmured, her voice slightly muffled against his chest. Jake, Aidan, and Will chuckled softly at her words. "It's all right, babe," Nathaniel reassured her, holding her tighter and planting a kiss on the top of her head. "But yes, Tom Hill is to blame for this," he added playfully. "But you could reverse it," she pleaded, her voice tinged with hope. "No, I won't do that. Tom used your money to buy it, so it remains yours," he stated firmly, making his decision clear. Meanwhile, Tom Hill, who had managed to secure a last-minute change to the cover publication of the country's most prestigious celebrity news magazine, paced anxiously by the elevator doors. As the doors slid open to reveal Nathaniel, Aria, and their entourage, he raised his hand in jubilation. "You have no idea of how happy I am to see you have made it," he exclaimed. His excitement faltered, however, when Dr. Hawthorne glowered at him upon spotting him. He couldn't help but notice the mischievous smirk on the faces of the men behind her as she folded her arms and strode out. "Really? Mr. Hill, what trouble have you concocted for me now, I wonder?" she said with a hint of dramatic flair. Aidan turned away, shoulders shaking with laughter, while Nathaniel leaned against the wall, grinning with devilish relish. Arya advanced on Tom, who tentatively backed away toward the boardroom. Whatever they've accused me of, Dr. Hawthorne, trust me, I am innocent," Tom replied, hands raised. Before Arya could respond, the boardroom doors slid open, and a man in a flamboyant jacket strode out, catching her attention. Upon seeing Arya and Nathaniel, he beamed with smiles. "Magnifique! Allons-y!" the man exclaimed with delight. Arya furrowed her brow in confusion as he hurried over, took her hand delicately, and slightly bowed his head. "Etienne Laurent at your service from Eminence Vogue, Dr. Hawthorne," he said with a charming smile. "I must say in person you appear even more magnificent. It would be a privilege to capture such beauty," he continued, his voice lowering to a deep, seductive murmur. As the man moved as though to touch Arya's face, with his eyes gleaming with captivation as if she were a flawless work of art, Nathaniel stepped forward. Whatever he discerned in Nathaniel's expression prompted him to awkwardly step back, clear his throat, and break into a loud clap. Shortly after, 3 women came out of the boardroom, approaching Nathaniel and Arya. "Remember the marriage announcement?" Tom Hill interjected swiftly, watching Nathaniel's expression darken. "Oh," Arya responded, realization dawning. They spent the next few minutes preparing for the photo shoot. One side of the boardroom had been converted into a studio with a white backdrop. Tom Hill had arranged white outfits for Nathaniel and Arya, who quickly changed behind a privacy shield. The makeup crew worked their magic on Arya, creating a natural nude look that accentuated her beauty. Her hair was elegantly pinned up with loose curls framing her face and cascading down her neck. When Nathaniel saw her emerge from behind the curtain, her enhanced beauty took his breath away, realizing anew that this stunning woman was his. She deepened his captivation with a smile that revealed her perfect white teeth. Etienne Laurent directed the shoot, guiding them in poses and demonstrating how he envisioned the photos. Arya felt a bit self-conscious, and Nathaniel sensed her stiffness as they posed closely together. He could tell the photographer wasn't satisfied with the shots each time he checked his camera. "I think something is missing," Nathaniel overheard him mutter to himself. Arya turned her head to Nathaniel and quipped, "I think he meant to say you married an awkward goose," giggling at her own joke. Nathaniel gazed deeply into her beautiful eyes, then lowered his head and whispered, "Do you mind not insulting my woman?" before pressing his lips firmly against hers in a passionate kiss. He paid no attention to the resumed camera flashes. At that moment, nothing else mattered to him. He wanted everyone to see through the damn camera lenses that she belonged to him alone. When he finally let her go, both were breathing heavily. Nathaniel realized his hand rested on her stomach, while the other gently cupped her by the throat. As they faced forward again, the camera continued to flash. Arya reflexively closed her eyes against the brightness, leaning into Nathaniel's protective embrace. When the flashing stopped and she opened her eyes, she noticed the room had fallen silent, all eyes fixed on them. "Damn," Aidan muttered quietly. Tom Hill grinned. I think I got the shots I needed," Etienne Laurent said, wiping sweat from his brow. "Thank you for your help," Tom Hill said as the crew quickly packed up. "What's next?" Tom asked Etienne Laurent. "I'm sending the pictures to the press right now." "Don't worry, we will make it," Etienne assured him. "Let's head back there now." "Need a lift?" Tom Hill offered. "Yes, thanks," he said to Tom. Then turning to Arya and Nathaniel, he added, "It was a pleasure meeting you in person, Mr. Hawthorne. And of course, Dr. Everly Hawthorne," taking a slight bow. "Likewise, Mr. Etienne Laurent," Arya replied. Nathaniel nodded curtly as he interlocked his fingers with Arya's and guided her out of the boardroom towards his office. "Good morning, sir." "Madam," Chloe greeted, standing up as they walked past her desk. "Good morning, Chloe," Arya responded. Nathaniel merely made a non-committal sound as they continued past her desk. When they reached his office door, Nathaniel unlocked it, ushered Arya inside, and turned the lock behind them. "Aren't we going to change back?" Arya asked as Nathaniel lifted her up onto his desk. "What do you think I'm about to do, honey?" he rasped. "Help take off my clothes," she whispered. "Help take off your clothes," Nathaniel confirmed, his voice deep and husky. Arya's heart skipped a beat as he moved to stand between her legs. She peered longingly into his eyes, searching his dark, smoldering gaze as he unbuttoned her suit jacket, lowering his face to take her lips. "Nathan," she moaned into his mouth, her voice soft and tender as she released a shaky breath. They arrived back at the Hawthorne residence at 11:55 a.m., and as they entered the foyer, Anna, Anita, and Alex returned. Arya breathed a sigh of relief seeing Anna's happy face, knowing the breakfast with her parents must have gone well. She drew Anna into a hug, with Anita joining in, the three of them expressing their happiness in a cheerful cry. To Nathaniel, the delighted gleam on Anna's face confirmed he had won the bet. Ethan came out of the kitchen just as Alex entered, beaming with smiles. "All right, pay up, gentlemen," Nathaniel quipped. "I'm curious to know exactly what you did to achieve this outcome." "As I'm pretty sure Nathaniel cheated," Ethan grumbled, while Alex burst out laughing. "Trust me, with the morning I had, there was no time for playing matchmaker," Nathaniel defended himself. Shortly after, Tom Hill arrived with a copy of the magazine featuring Nathaniel and Arya on the cover. Nathaniel grinned as he saw it. It perfectly captured what he had envisioned. Dr. Ariana Everly Hawthorne was unmistakably his, and his possessive stance behind her made it clear. Interrupting the ladies' happy chatter, Tom offered Arya the magazine. She gasped upon seeing it, her beautiful face flushing. "Oh my God, this is amazing!" Anna exclaimed in delight, fist-bumping Anita before smiling at Arya. Arya covered her face, feeling a bit shy. It is public knowledge now. She was Nathaniel Hawthorne's woman, and everyone would know it. Arya felt a mix of pride and shyness. Nathaniel chuckled and leaned in to give her a quick kiss on the lips. "Love you," she whispered, peering into his eyes. "Love you more," Nathaniel responded with a heartfelt sincerity. When Andrew joined the group, he quietly sidled up next to Jake. "How's your morning been?" Andrew asked. Jake grinned and started by sharing the story of catching Scott with his pants down with an intern at Evergreen Memorial Hospital. He then moved on to recounting the details of the photo shoot and Dr. Hawthorne's discovery about the shares Tom Hill had tricked her into buying. "It sounds like you guys had a much better morning than I did. At least I got to spend it with my wife," Andrew quipped, realizing he had wrongly deduced how the Morrises knew Dr. Everly Hawthorne. Perhaps they were part of the elite who were familiar with her expertise and aware that she owned Evergreen Memorial Hospital and was now married to Nathaniel Hawthorne. Jake led him away from the foyer, and together they headed towards the kitchen. "Good morning, Mrs. Jonas." "Mary." Andrew greeted each of the kitchen staff by name, and they responded warmly. "Where have you been?" "You missed breakfast," Mrs. Jonas remarked. "Yes, I had to join Mr. Sterndale and Miss Morris for breakfast, but don't worry, I always have room for more." "I'll never turn down your cooking," Andrew teased, earning a chuckle from the older woman who waved off his compliment. Andrew then refocused on Jake, who briefed him on the anonymous parcel. "And Scott mentioned it's from Nepal with no return address," Andrew repeated, his brow furrowing in thought. "Yes," Jake confirmed. "Man, this is bad. If Dr. Hawthorne thinks the case is beyond hope, how can we persuade her to take it without revealing the risk exceeded her medical expertise?" Arya couldn't help blushing at the sight of her pose with Nathaniel, and the more she pondered how many people were going to see it, including people she worked with, the more self-conscious she became. She couldn't resist the urge to brush her fingers over the picture and trace Nathaniel's incredibly attractive features. She raised her eyes automatically, searching for him in the living room. As though he could sense her emotions, he directed his gaze toward her, meeting and holding her eyes across the room. He stood in the middle of Alex and Ethan. She had no idea what the three were arguing about, but whatever it was making Nathaniel and Alex laugh, which evidently Ethan wasn't finding amusing. Anna had gone to change into something practical for shopping, and Arya was left with Anita, who was momentarily distracted by an issue with Noria. Noria was supposed to stay at the Madison Avenue apartment until she got her own place, and one of the Hawthorne guards had picked her up at the airport and taken her to the apartment. However, the key to the apartment was with Anita, and the security at the apartment was grilling Noria and the guard, not wanting to let them in. "Would you like to speak with Dr. Everly Hawthorne before you go and open the apartment for my friend?" Anita was saying. Arya watched the corners of Nathaniel's lips tweak into a smile as she continued to gawk at him. He subtly raised his eyebrows and tilted his head slightly, a silent question asking if she needed him. She responded by pressing her hand to her heart and then pointing at him, silently communicating that she always would. His boyish grin made her heart contract. "Arya," Anita called, giving her a side nudge, making her flinch and snapping her out of the romantic haze. Nathaniel was swirling in her brain. The rascal had the nerve to chuckle, earning a quick glare from Arya. He blew her a kiss, and Arya felt her cheeks warm with heat. "You two need to get a room," Anita whispered close to her ear. Arya fidgeted, tucking a loose curl behind her ear. Anita arched an eyebrow at her, making her straighten up. She cleared her throat and said, "You have my full attention," her voice low and raspy. "Uh-huh," Anita responded with skepticism before handing over the phone. "Yes, hello, this is Dr. Everly Hawthorne," she began, and promptly explained to the security that Noria was her and Anita's guest and should be allowed into the apartment. "However, if anyone comes asking to see her, I expect you to let Anita or me know before confirming with Noria," Arya quickly added, remembering the conditions surrounding the poor girl's situation. "All right, duly noted, Doctor," the guard replied. "Can you please give the phone to her?" Arya said, a pensive frown furrowing her eyebrows as she recalled that the girl didn't have any clothes. "Very well," the guard said, and then a tentative, "Hello," sounded from the other end. "How are you, Noria? This is Dr. Everly Hawthorne. I'm so sorry for the trouble," she quickly said. "It's, okay, madam," Noria replied in a hesitant voice. "Please call me Arya. I know you are probably tired from the exhausting journey, but I was wondering if you wouldn't mind going out with me, Anita, and our friend, Anna," Arya said. I don't think I have the appropriate dress for an outing," she replied shyly. "Don't worry, you can wear whatever you have, and we will remedy that problem during our outing," Arya replied. "All right, ma'am, I mean Dr. Hawthorne," she stuttered, clearly uncomfortable calling Arya by her first name. Arya chuckled warmly. "Okay, we will pick you up shortly," Arya said and handed the phone back to Anita, who was already smiling at Arya's thoughtfulness. "I'm ready," Anna announced upon joining them. Anita finished her call as Arya stood up, feeling a nudge from one of the baby's legs against her ribcage. She grunted, rubbing the side of her stomach as she approached Nathaniel, Alex, and Ethan. Nathaniel's gaze remained fixed on her, noticing her slight wince, and how she immediately started to soothe the side of her baby bump. "Are you okay, baby?" he asked, brows furrowed. "I'm fine. Just the baby's doing literal gymnastics," she joked. He gave her a concerned, searching look. "Are you ladies going somewhere?" Ethan inquired. "Yep, we're going shopping at the farmer's market and for clothes," Arya replied. "Are you sure you're up for that, considering how busy your morning has been?" Nathaniel questioned, clearly not pleased. "I promise we won't overdo it. We'll go straight to Union Square Green Market, then Fifth Avenue, maybe have brunch, and head straight home," Arya reassured. "Don't worry, I won't let her overdo it," Anna chimed in, standing by Arya's side. "Me neither," Anita added, coming to stand on the other side. Nathaniel hesitated before nodding. He pulled out his wallet and took out a black card, handing it to Arya. "Just prioritize your health, please. We have people who can help plan your party. You don't need to be physically involved all the time, baby," he cautioned, leaning in to kiss her. "I know, indulge me just this once," she replied. "Maybe we can join you ladies on Fifth Avenue and have lunch together," Ethan suggested, sensing Nathaniel's concern about Arya overexerting herself. But he knew she always put others' happiness above her own, even when tired. Her late father had been like that too, so hearing how he died didn't surprise him. "Ethan's right. Let's make it the start of tomorrow's engagement party," Alex proposed. Arya glanced at Anna and Anita, who both shrugged. "The more the merrier," Anna smiled. "Good, we'll join you then," Nathaniel said, excusing himself. He walked off to find Andrew or Jake and found them with Aidan and Charles in the kitchen, discussing something quietly. Nathaniel grew concerned, wondering if there were any new developments. "Boss," Andrew said, as he saw Nathaniel approaching. "Is everything all right?" Nathaniel probed, giving the four a searching gaze. "Jake told me about the parcel Dr. Everly Hawthorne received, and we were deliberating on the security at the hospital and around her," Andrew recounted. "I have a feeling Samuel Cavalier might want to seek her out personally, just like he did with the parcel, and I just don't want us to rule out any tactics they might employ to get to her," Jake said. Nathaniel instantly grew worried. "What do you mean by tactics?" he asked gingerly, holding the other man's gaze. "If she says no or shows unknowingly to an informant that she thinks the case is hopeless, I'm thinking they might try to take her hostage to make her operate, no matter what," Jake supplied. Nathaniel's heart skipped a beat at the notion of the word abduct. "They will not dare," he said in a low, forceful growl. "I think we need to be prepared for the worst, boss. I don't know, but I have a feeling that the parcel was sent personally by Samuel Cavalier. And if he's been forced to do that, we can't really say what they might attempt," Jake said. He knew the last thing Nathaniel Hawthorne wanted to hear was that his wife might be in danger of abduction, but he wanted them to be vigilant and acknowledge the possibility. "Henri might try that too to keep her from doing the surgery," Aidan said in a solemn tone. "Damn it, and she is planning a goddamn party," Nathaniel muttered under his breath, clearly agitated. "We will handle this, boss. There's no need to alarm Dr. Hawthorne, we just have to up our game and be ready," Jake assured. "Jake, Aidan and I will accompany her to their shopping destination, boss. Charles and the rest of the team will stay with you just in case," Andrew said. "No, you four go with her. Will and the others can stay here. We plan to join them at Fifth Avenue later anyway," Nathaniel replied, paused, and then added, "For all that's holy, do not let her out of your sight, I beg you," Nathaniel said in a low, forceful tone. The four men nodded. When Aria, Anita, and Anna stepped outside onto the porch, Aria furrowed her brows at the sight of their transportation. It wasn't the usual Ford Jeep that Nathaniel normally had her chauffeured in. Instead, an imposing, gleaming Range Rover Autobiography stood elegantly parked in front of the stairs. Anna let out a low whistle. "Wow, Nate really knows how to spoil his lady," she remarked, eyeing the luxurious SUV with admiration. Anita nodded in agreement. "This is... wow," she said with a grin, already envisioning the comfort and prestige of riding in such a vehicle. As they descended the stairs and reached the landing, Aria glanced back and through the foyer's glass wall caught sight of Nathaniel's imposing frame. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching them. In the background, she could see Alex and Ethan engaged in conversation. Aria could tell that Nathaniel was worried about her, and she figured he had chosen the autobiography for its unmatched luxury and capability, ensuring their outing would be both stylish and comfortable. Giving him a reassuring smile, Aria gestured a promise to be cautious, her hand moving gracefully through the air in a deliberate, calming motion. Nathaniel responded with a reciprocal sign, his expression tender yet concerned, as he responded, "See you soon, my love," with a gentle nod and a subtle sweep of his hand towards his heart. Aria's heart constricted with emotions. As they settled into the plush leather seats, and one of the guards helped them to pull the door shut with a soft thud, Aria couldn't help feeling unsettled. Silently noting that Andrew was behind the wheel, Jake was in the passenger seat, while Aidan and Charles occupied the rear seats, boxing in her, Anita, and Anna in the middle seat. It became clear to Aria that Nathaniel was far more concerned than he was letting on, to have his top 4 men accompanying them for just a short trip a few blocks away. Andrew started the Range Rover Autobiography, the smooth, powerful engine purring quietly to life. "We need to pick up Noria," Anita said to Andrew, who nodded. She reached from the back to wrap her arms around his neck and started to slowly smooth the front of his suit. Jake looked away to hide a chuckle. Aidan's ears perked up upon hearing Noria mentioned. "I didn't know Noria was to be included in the outing," Andrew responded. Aria decided to invite her, Anita supplied. "Sorry, last minute," Aria added with a smile. "She's back then?" Aidan probed. "Yes, Aidan," Jake answered from the front seat. "I told Lewis to go pick her up early when Anton called to let me know the rest of the staff were back. I didn't want them bringing her here before having her taken to Madison," Jake explained, keeping the fact that it wasn't just Noria that Anton had called to inform him about, but also Henri Cavalier's informant, who had been taken to captain. "All right," Aidan said, settling back and staring unseeingly, wondering how she was and if she was fine. He figured he would know shortly. Before they got to the apartment, Andrew called Lewis to warn him that they were close by. By the time they arrived in front of the luxury apartment building, Lewis and Noria were waiting for them. Jake got down to open the door for Noria, and Aidan watched as she gave him a grateful smile. She stopped in her tracks when she looked inside the car and saw him in the back. He gingerly waved at her, noting she looked far better than the last time he saw her. She seemed to have gained weight, and her skin wasn't looking as ashen, and could almost pass for tan, which was surprising. Her hair looked healthy with some bounce and shine. However, her dress was a tad big for her, as was the oversized cardigan she had over it. "Good afternoon," she greeted everyone. Aidan's heart constricted with emotion as the three ladies drew her into a hug, welcoming her as if she were one of them. A natural addition. He looked away, the sight making him unexpectedly emotional. "Oh, I pity any fucker who tries to harm Dr. Everly Hawthorne," he thought darkly. "I would personally use their skull as a ball." Their next stop was Union Square Green Market, located about a mile away from Madison Avenue. The bustling farmers market was nestled in the heart of New York City, boasting rows of tents and stalls overflowing with fresh, locally grown produce. Bathed in the afternoon sunlight, the market exuded vibrant colors and inviting aromas, showcasing a wide variety of fruits and vegetables. Colorful heirloom tomatoes, crisp apples, juicy berries, leafy greens, aromatic herbs like basil and mint, and a selection of root vegetables such as carrots and potatoes adorned the stalls. Artisanal bread, cheeses, honey, spices, and flowers were also on offer from various vendors. The atmosphere buzzed with life as shoppers perused the offerings, sampling freshly baked goods and chatting with the farmers. The ladies were more interested in the spice stand and approached the vendor. "Could we please have the spices used in West African pepper soup?" Anita asked. The vendor beamed with a surprised but pleased smile and swiftly began selecting spices, placing each into small jars and naming them as she packed them into a branded brown paper bag. "We have African nutmeg, botanical name Monodora myristica, Guinea plum, botanical name Chrysobelinus ikako, grains of psyllium, botanical name Xylopia ethiopica, Guinea cubebs, botanical name Piper guineense, alligator pepper, botanical name Aphoramoma melegueta, Tetrapleura, Tetraptera, and cocoplum, botanical name Chrysobelinus ikako," she concluded. Then the vendor added, "You making fish pepper soup or beef? We have fresh-caught fish and organic beef at another stand." In a clear Caribbean accented tone, "We'd like to try both fish and beef," Aria began. But seeing the older woman's frown, she quickly clarified, in separate dishes, of course. "Ah!" The woman's face lit up with a smile, and she nodded in approval. Anita and Anna giggled, and even Noria smiled shyly. Aria thought for a moment there that the older woman must think she had lost her mind. They continued shopping, buying fresh fish, organic beef, fresh cheese, and flowers for the rooftop tables. About 2 hours later, they found themselves on Fifth Avenue. Aria guided the ladies to a shop where they could find regular clothes for Noria. Upon entering the boutique, Aria noticed the woman's eyes light up upon seeing her, momentarily taken aback as the woman hurried over with a beaming smile, addressing her by name. Aria quickly remembered the magazine and composed herself, though she didn't miss the disapproving glance the woman shot towards Noria, which immediately upset her. "How can I assist you, Dr. Hawthorne?" the woman said, nodding politely at Anna and Anita, and completely ignoring Noria, deciding she would only purchase one dress from this shop and take her business elsewhere. Aria began, "My friend here," as she gestured towards Noria. The younger girl looked alarmed and began to protest, but Anna hushed her. Noria swallowed hard and politely stepped forward. Aria then added, "She needs a change of clothes and shoes. Do you have something suitable?" Aria noticed the disappointed look on the woman's face and felt somewhat satisfied that she understood she would not be making a larger sale. "Of course, Dr. Hawthorne," the woman replied. To Noria, she said, "Please, miss, come with me." Noria nodded and followed the woman, with Anna following behind. Aria gave Anna a grateful glance. When the three women returned, Aria and Anita smiled at Noria's transformation. Here, Arya offered Nathaniel's card, and the woman looked wistfully at the card as she asked, "Will that be all, madam?" "Yes, thank you," Arya replied firmly. Charles, who was watching the exchange from the entrance door, smiled to himself. When the ladies exited the boutique, Noria was carrying a bag with the dress she had been wearing. Aidan froze upon seeing her. Now that she had changed into a beautiful sundress that fit her perfectly, she looked like a model with her tall, slim frame and long, swan-like neck. They had styled her hair to highlight her high cheekbones and accentuate her eye colours. "Whoa, is that Noria?" Jake muttered to Andrew as they stood guard by the car, watching the ladies. "I think Aidan's got himself a date," Andrew quipped. Aidan was speechless, stunned by her transformation. As the ladies moved to Bergdorf Goodman, Jake was distracted by a phone call. He smiled as he saw the caller ID and immediately answered. "Hello, beautiful," he said. Christine's giggle came through the line. "I'm sorry to call out of the blue. I just wanted to let you know I'm back home to my very safe, boring routine," she quipped. Jake chuckled. "Sounds like you're not ready to dive back into that routine." "I'm not going to lie. I'm glad to be back." "That adventure was enough excitement to last me 10 years, she joked. "Really? So, if I were to ask a friend to pick you up in a helicopter and bring you to an engagement party hosted by Dr. Everly Hawthorne, you'd say no?" Jake teased. There was a pause before she replied, "Are you asking me to be your date?" "Yes, I am." "What do you say?" Jake asked. "I'll say I had better not unpack yet," she replied, her excitement obvious. "I'll arrange for him to pick you up tomorrow afternoon." "Let me know where you'll be by 12 p.m., Jake instructed. After the call, Jake realized he'd wandered a few steps from the car. While the car was still there, neither the men nor the ladies were in sight. He hurried back and entered a nearby boutique. "Sir, is there something you need?" a salesgirl asked, approaching him immediately. "I think I must be." Before he could finish, a familiar voice called out, "Whoa, is that Jake Darfield?" Jake shut his eyes and prayed to all the gods it wasn't who he thought, but then he caught the sight of the tall bastard in the corner of his eye with his very first girlfriend on his arm. "Sir, can I help you with something?" another salesgirl asked. Jake figured they must be working on commission, judging by the way they rushed at him as if he was some kind of prize. "Oh, don't waste your time on him. He's as poor as a church mouse," a familiar female voice said. Jake sighed and turned to face the couple. The first thing Jake noticed when he turned to the couple was that Patrick Parker was wearing a wedding band, while Abigail Johnson was not. The three of them had grown up in Sagebrush Junction, a quaint town in the heart of Texas, known for its historic charm and close-knit community. The town, surrounded by rolling hills and open prairies, had an evocative feel similar to Coyote Springs, the nearest town. Patrick had been engaged to Sadie Reeves, the mayor's daughter, when Jake first caught him and Abigail together. Abigail had bragged that Patrick was marrying Sadie for her money and status, and planned to divorce her later to marry Abigail. Jake did a mental calculation and thought this must be the longest con he'd ever heard of. Like Jake, Abigail had been dirt poor and considered trailer trash by the more affluent residents. However, Jake's family, the Darfields, had a home, rundown, but a home nonetheless, on a secluded, expansive piece of land where his father could do as he pleased. Jake met Abigail when he was 16 and she was 17. To him, she seemed as free as a bird, with no one questioning where she had been, who she was with, or when she needed to be home. Abigail was far more experienced beyond her age, and Jake was naive enough back then to believe she actually liked him. Until he caught her with Old Man Parker, who was already in his 20s at the time. Abigail reminded Jake of Julia, a woman obsessed with having a man take care of her, blind to her own potential. He couldn't believe Abigail had stayed as Patrick's mistress, unless, of course, he was wrong. "Hello to you too, Abigail. Or should I say Mrs. Parker," Jake quipped, watching as the smug smile faded from Abigail's face, and she shot a glare at Patrick. The other man looked uncomfortable as he let go of her hand. He awkwardly cleared his throat and mumbled, "We are not married, Jake." "Of course," Jake replied. "Not that it's any of your business." "I don't see you wearing a ring either," Abigail fired back at him. Yeah, he said simply, with no intention of divulging more. If you are not buying something, sir, I must ask you to leave, one of the sales clerks said, looking a tad irritated, possibly because they wouldn't be making a sale. Abigail let out a low, malicious laugh. Maybe you can sell him one of your hangers. I'm sure poor Jake Darfield could at least afford that, she jeered. The corner of Jake's lips curled into a smile, realizing that there was a time in his life when such a childish display could get under his skin. Now he felt a tad embarrassed for her. He looked at her, really looked at her, and noticed the unhappy strain on her once youthful, pretty face. Her straight dark hair and lovely green eyes, now dulled, were framed by bitter lines around her mouth and wrinkles at the corners of her eyes. She forced a tight smile, but it didn't reach her eyes, which looked tired and worn. Jake knew he didn't need to prove anything to her or her boyfriend. If he wanted, he could buy the entire damn store without batting an eye. Working for the Hawthornes all these years had been more than good for him. Like the rest of the Hawthorne guards, he was fed, clothed, and housed by them. They went everywhere Nathaniel went and vacationed at the best sites around the globe. They had no need to touch their income, and most of them invested in Farmer Hawthorne. After years of doing so, they were all literal millionaires. Their work was out of passion and loyalty, not a desperate need to make money. Jake glanced from the salesgirl who had asked him to leave to the one who first spotted him, sweeping his eyes over her. He estimated she and Christine would be about the same size. Then he directed his gaze to a mannequin by the shop window, silently taking in the elegant dinner dress on display before turning back to the salesgirl. "What's your dress size, if you don't mind me asking?" Jake said to the girl. She hesitated, looking taken aback. "Ah, please," as if. Abigail scoffed. "Come on, Jake. You can't afford anything here." Patrick Parker chuckled. I'm size 8, the salesgirl supplied. "Could you please let me have that dress on display?" He gestured to the mannequin. "But in white with champagne gold matching shoes and bag, please," Jake asked, handing his card to the salesgirl. She hesitated for a second before taking the card and offering a hesitant smile. She asked, "What's the shoe size?" Jake lowered his gaze to her feet and said, "Take off your shoes, please." The girl awkwardly complied. Jake knelt down to feel her feet and asked, "What's your shoe size?" Size 8, the girl replied tentatively. "Make the shoes size 8 too, then," he answered as he straightened up. "1 minute, sir," the girl said and hurried away. Abigail couldn't resist taunting him. "Oh, Jake, who are you trying to impress with your limited budget again?" she giggled. Patrick Parker joined in with a chuckle. "Stick to your usual bargain hunting, Jake. This place isn't for everyone, you know." The other salesgirl folded her arms, giving Jake a skeptical look. "Must you embarrass yourself like this, Jake?" Abigail scoffed. "Dreaming big again, aren't we?" Smirking, Patrick Parker added, "You're just wasting everyone's time here." Despite their remarks, the salesgirl returned quickly with a bright smile, handing over the packed dress, shoes, his card, and receipt. "Thank you, sir," she greeted him. The other sales assistant looked annoyed and shot a vexed glance at Abigail. "How can you afford that? Are you sure that card isn't stolen?" Abigail protested, clearly flustered and surprised. "Maybe you should check that card to make sure it's really his," she added. Meanwhile, Will, who was parking the Jeep that had brought Nathaniel and his friends to Fifth Avenue, spotted Jake through the boutique's glass showcase. "Is that Jake?" he said, bemused. Nathaniel, Alex, and Ethan looked over and saw him too. When Nathaniel got out of the Jeep, he strode to the boutique's entrance, opened the door, and peered inside. "This is a women's boutique, Jake," he quipped. Jake turned to face him and chuckled, holding up the package. "A gift," he said simply. Nathaniel replied, stepping back from the door to join Alex and Ethan on the sidewalk. They'd seen Andrew and Aiden guarding a boutique's entrance just a few shops away, and knew that meant Aria, Anita, and Anna were likely inside. Jake turned to glance in Abigail and Parker's direction to bid them farewell and noticed they had frozen in place with shock, as had the sales ladies. That's Nathaniel Hawthorne, Patrick Parker pointed out, stuttering. "Yes, he is. See you around and take care, Abigail," Jake said and turned to leave. "Wait," Abigail called out. Jake looked back at her over his shoulder. "May I please have your number?" "I'm sorry, I was." Jake shook his head emphatically before she could finish her sentence, cutting her off. "No, hell no," he said and walked out. "Thank you for your purchase, sir. We hope to see you again soon." The the salesgirl called after him. Aria, Anita, Anna, and Noria have since moved from Bergdorf Goodman to 3 other shops on the lane. Having acquired enough clothes, underwear, shoes, and casual wear for Noria, they entered a new shop that appeared to be recently opened. They had purchased everything needed, and everyone had gotten their evening gowns, except for Aria. She wanted something elegant, stylish, sexy, and comfortable. A rare combination in high-end evening wear. Aria was tired, eager to get off her feet, and hungry. She hoped this last shop had what she was looking for. Peering inside the boutique, they found it unusually busy and jam-packed, with 2 ladies already arguing over who first picked up a dress. There were about 12 live models strategically positioned throughout the expansive space, all wearing elegant evening wear. One model immediately caught Aria's attention. She wore a white wrap dress that glittered under the combination of white and candlelight glow in the shop. An upbeat music was playing in the background, mixing with the raucous sound of women fighting over rare finds. "What's this place?" Anita said under her breath, almost in awe. "Are these rich people?" Noria muttered to herself, making Aria chuckle. "Perhaps we should see who can pay more for the dress then," one of the ladies remarked. "It's not an auction, Mrs. Evelyn Rodriguez. And even if it were, the mediocre commission your husband makes from stocks wouldn't suffice." The other lady fired back. "I feel like interrupting any of this would be intruding," Anita quipped. "Right. Like we should get popcorn or something," Aria whispered a reply. Anna giggled and said, "Let a New Yorker tell you what is happening. Ladies, see that signage over there?" Anna pointed to a digital board flashing 1-hour opening sale. "See that digital timer?" She gestured towards a timer standing in the middle of the shop. Naturally, most of these ladies wouldn't be able to darken the entrance of this establishment, but for 1 hour today, they get to make a run for it. You know, there are rich people, and then there are extremely rich people. This shop is for the extremely, extremely rich people, Anna explained. Aria's brows furrowed, and she and Anita shared a look. Curious about what Anna meant, they sidled up to one of the live models and checked the price tag of the elegant dress on display. "Holy!" Anita exclaimed, understanding why Anna had said the extremely twice. Aria quickly covered her mouth, and they shared a comical glance as they slowly backed away from the model, who stood still like a mannequin. "That's way too much for a girl from Sylvan Ridge, Alaska," Aria murmured, giggling. "But it isn't for Mrs. Hawthorne, though." A familiar deep voice said from behind them, making the 2 turn around to face Nathaniel. "Hello, baby," he rasped with a smirk. "How long have you been standing there?" Aria whispered self-consciously. His grin grew and he leaned into her. "Don't worry, I don't think anyone saw you 2 slowly backing away from the price tag," he quipped, his voice low in a conspiratorial whisper. Aria and Anita giggled. "Come now, how many of the dresses are we picking?" he asked, drawing her into a hug as Anna and Noria joined them. "Jesus, just one," she said, repeating it with emphasis. Anita shook with laughter. When Nathaniel's eyes settled on Noria, he didn't immediately recognize her. Andrew noticed Nathaniel's pensive frown and whispered in his ear, "That's the girl from the ship, Noria." Nathaniel's eyes widened in understanding, and he nodded in acknowledgement to her. "Good afternoon, Mr. Hawthorne," Noria greeted immediately. When the shop manager came out and saw Nathaniel, then Aria, and then Anna Morris, he seemed confused about how to act. He rushed in all directions before finally standing still, taking a deep breath and announcing, "We've closed for the day, everyone out!" Aria's brows furrowed in bemusement. Nathaniel caught her expression and leaned in to whisper in her ear, "He's clearing the shop for us, baby." His warm breath fanned the shell of her ear. Her eyelids fluttered at the rush of heat under her skin, and she leaned into him. "Tired," he rasped. Aria nodded. Nathaniel found a seat and ushered her there as the manager shooed everyone else out. When it was just the Hawthornes and their friends, the manager and his sales team gathered around them, beaming with smiles. Aria thought it was a lot of attention for just buying one dress, but then she remembered the price tag and felt more at ease. "How may we be of service, sir, madam?" the manager greeted. A few minutes later, they left the shop and headed to a restaurant on Park Avenue for lunch. Aria smiled to herself, recalling how stunning the dress had looked on her during the fitting, eagerly anticipating Nathaniel's reaction when he saw her in it. At the restaurant, Alex, Ethan, Anna, Anita, and Andrew joined Nathaniel and Aria at their table, while Aidan, Charles, Will, and 2 other guards sat with Noria. Aidan sat beside her, effortlessly assisting with her order and ensuring she felt comfortable. "How are you?" he asked as they ate. Noria nodded with her mouth full, unable to respond properly, only managing to cover her mouth with her hand and nod with wide eyes. Aidan chuckled softly, looking at her affectionately, and gently dabbed a stain from the corner of her mouth. The 2 shared an affectionate gaze before looking away. Meanwhile, at the Hawthornes' table, the group discussed their day, while Jake texted Anton about helping him pick up Christine. Aria ordered a chocolate ice cream dessert with crushed brownies and waffles. When it arrived, Nathaniel watched as she savored the taste, her eyes closing in delight. Anna fed Alex a bite of her dessert, and Anita did the same for Andrew, prompting a playful protest from Ethan. Nathaniel leaned closer to Aria for a taste of her dessert, and as he closed his mouth over the golden spoon, Aria felt him put his hand on her thighs. His dark, smoldering gaze met hers as he gently stroked her inner thighs, causing her to sit up straighter, move closer to him with her ample chest heaving. Soon enough, the 2 tables were merged as they ordered more finger food, drinks, and chatted away. Aria couldn't quite figure out if she was enjoying what Nathaniel was doing to her with his fingers, or if it was pure torture, but she didn't want him to stop. Much later, around 6 p.m., they all spilled out, the rush of cold air reminding them it was late fall and the beginning of winter. It was already pitch black outside, and Nathaniel drew Aria close to his body when he saw her folding her arms around herself. Andrew and Jake flanked the 2, while Aidan, Charles, and Will guarded the group from behind. The other 2 guards led the group, and when they were a few feet to the SUV, rushed ahead to get the doors, but then a raggedy old man who looked homeless suddenly darted in front of Aria and Nathaniel. "Hey, can you spare a few dollars? I'm really hungry and cold," he pleaded just as Jake raised a gun to his head, and Andrew tried to forcefully move him back without attracting attention. "Wait," Nathaniel growled as the man looked up, meeting his eyes. Nathaniel's chest heaved as he looked into the familiar grey eyes. Darting his gaze to meet Jake's in a silent message, he turned to look into Aria's eyes and said, "Go with Andrew, babe." "Nathan?" Aria called, bemused. "Come with me, Dr. Hawthorne," Andrew urged, as Aria watched Nathaniel take off his long coat and drape it over the homeless man, covering his head and face. His tall, imposing frame a clear advantage as he gathered the man to his side in a protective hug and ushered him to the jeep Will had brought them in. Aria had no choice but to follow Andrew. Ethan and Alex got into the SUV with the ladies alongside Andrew and Charles, while Jake and Aidan flanked Nathaniel and the homeless man, helping him into the back seat of the jeep. "Where to, boss?" Will immediately asked, as soon as the doors slammed shut. "Evergreen Memorial?" Nathaniel replied, the sense of urgency in his voice palpable. "Jake, ask Anton to bring Rowan in," Nathaniel ordered. "Yes, boss," Jake replied, and took out his phone. Meanwhile, Andrew had gotten behind the wheel of the Rover SUV, quickly driving off at high speed, heading back to the Hawthorne mansion. Aria knew something significant had just happened, but no one spoke. The interior of the car was as quiet as a graveyard. The drive back to the house took less than 5 minutes. Andrew parked the SUV and quickly got out with Charles, both opening the doors so everyone could exit. When Aria stepped out, she noticed the porch was now lined with Hawthorne guards standing in formation, shielding them as they moved towards the house entrance. Although Aria felt a pang of worry, she trusted Andrew to handle the situation. "What about our shopping bags, baby? Some need to go in here, and some to Madison Avenue," Anita said to Andrew. "Don't worry, honey, I'll take care of it. When I need you to sort them out, I'll call you, okay?" Andrew replied, giving her a quick kiss as Anita helped Noria out of the car. "Am I supposed to get out here too?" Noria whispered to Andrew. "Charles!" Andrew called to the other guard, who was at the top of the stairs guarding Dr. Hawthorne inside. Charles hurried back and Andrew said, "Could you please take Noria to Aidan's room?" Turning to Noria, he added, "Aidan and I will get you and Anita back home when we're done here. Meanwhile, you can rest in Aidan's room." Noria nodded, but as Charles reached for her forearm, she flinched and stepped back. Momentarily taken aback, Charles looked to Andrew for guidance. "Hey, Noria, it's okay. He's just trying to help," Andrew said gently. Anita, who had taken a few steps ahead, came back and drew Noria into a side hug. "It's okay, I'll go with you," she reassured. With Charles leading, he guided them to the Hawthorne guards' quarters. Andrew quickly ascended the stairs to the foyer, not surprised to find Dr. Hawthorne pacing at the foot of the stairs, clearly waiting for him. "Who was that homeless guy, Andrew? And is Nathan safe?" she asked, visibly agitated. Upon reaching Evergreen Memorial, Will drove the car to the emergency section. Jake and Aidan got out to flank Nathaniel as he guided the homeless man inside the hospital. "Sir, is there a problem?" A nurse approached them with a wheelchair. Nathaniel nodded gratefully as he lowered the old man into the wheelchair. "Are there any diagnostic doctors on duty?" Nathaniel asked as he continued inside, not pausing at the emergency ward, but using it as a path of entrance. "Yes, Mr. Hawthorne. Dr. Yen is on duty, and Dr. Sterling is in the building, but about to leave," she replied, hurrying after them. "Which of the two is authorized to go to the topmost ward?" Jake asked. "Dr. Sterling," the nurse promptly replied. "Get her then. Tell her to meet us by the elevator now," Nathaniel ordered. The nurse nodded and replied, "Yes, sir," before rushing off. Dr. Sterling joined them as they reached the elevator. Holding the doors for her, they waited until she hurried inside. She used her keycard to authorize the elevator's ascent to the topmost floor. "Good evening, Mr. Hawthorne," Dr. Sterling greeted. "What do we have here?" she promptly asked. Nathaniel removed the jacket he had used to shield the older man, watching as he settled comfortably in the wheelchair. Jake noticed the doctor's frown as she examined the man, a groove forming between her eyebrows. The doctor began to say, but then reconsidered, throwing a questioning look at Nathaniel instead. Aidan knew the word she didn't dare say out loud was homeless. Upon reaching the topmost floor, Nathaniel wheeled the older man out of the elevator to the lobby. A receptionist quickly got up upon seeing them. "May I have a new patient folder, please? Thanks," Dr. Sterling instructed hurriedly. The old man was assigned a room, and Nathaniel and Aidan assisted him in removing his layered clothing, revealing a torso taped with large envelopes, a satellite phone, a gun, and cash in 5 currencies: United Kingdom pound sterling, Nigerian naira, United States dollars, euros, and Emirati dirhams. Nathaniel's lips twitched into a smile as they also discovered a knife with a family crest at the hilt strapped to the man's left ankle. After helping him into a hospital robe, Nathaniel looked at Jake and said, "Find him and bring him here." Jake didn't need to ask who. He left, almost running as he headed back to the reception. Shortly after, he was on his way to room 102. Knocking on the door, he pushed it open. The man on the bed sat up upon seeing him, brows furrowed. A minute later, Jake wheeled him to room 110 and pushed the door open to reveal the older man on the bed. Dr. Sterling had connected IV fluids to his hand, and blankets were pulled up to his chest. "Grandpa!" Sean Cavalier called out in shock, his eyes widening, brows furrowing, and mouth hanging open. "Hello, Sean. It's nice to see you again," Samuel Cavalier rasped tiredly. Then turning to Nathaniel, he said, "I'm going to need your father's right-hand man, Nate." Nathaniel's brows furrowed. "You mean Tom Hill?" he asked. "Yes, for what I'm about to do, we're going to need his kind of lawyer present," Samuel Cavalier said. "Grandpa, Did you come here alone? How did you manage that?" Sean Cavalier questioned, still in shock. Samuel Cavalier chuckled. "I didn't get to where I am by being predictable. I see you survived, Umre," he rasped. Nathaniel, who was taking out his phone, froze as he raised his eyes to meet and held the old man's. "How did you find that out?" Nathaniel asked, just as Sean directed his gaze at Nathaniel to ask him, "You have told him everything?" The two men frowned, directing their attention to the older man. "Please, do you think I could find something to eat?" Samuel said to Dr. Sterling, who promptly nodded and said, "Of course, sir. Give me a minute," before she left. When the door had shut behind her, Nathaniel noticed that Samuel waited, evidently wanting to be sure the doctor had left. Jake moved to open the door to peer into the hallway, making sure no one was there before closing it. "All clear," he announced. "I take it you trust your men, Nate?" Samuel Cavalier inquired. darting his piercing gaze from Jake to Aidan. "With my life," Nathaniel replied. Samuel Cavalier nodded. "Please have Tom Hill come over," he said. Nathaniel immediately called the house, asking Andrew to ensure tight security before bringing Tom Hill to the hospital. "Have Miss Jonas pack dinner for 2, Nathaniel instructed. After ending the call, Samuel Cavalier said, "Thank you, Nate. You're a good man." Sean Cavalier's face showed a mix of emotions at the note of vulnerability in his grandfather's statement. "Accosting me like that in the street was risky, Uncle Sam," Nathaniel gently chided. "Coming here or going to your house, all Sean's would have been predictable and expected," the older man replied. "Especially now that I understand why Anne is indulging Henry," Samuel said with a resigned sigh. "Does that mean you know what he's done?" Sean asked tentatively, fear evident in his voice. Samuel Cavalier sighed, shifting his gaze between Nathaniel and Sean. "There's something I need to tell you, Sean, or perhaps show you, but I'll only do so when Tom Hill arrives." Nathaniel furrowed his brows. "Why?" he pressed. "Why is it so crucial that we wait for Tom Hill?" "Because I don't want to repeat myself," Samuel replied with raised eyebrows, prompting Nathaniel to chuckle. A few minutes later, Dr. Sterling returned with a tray of food for Samuel Cavalier, and shortly after, Tom Hill arrived with Andrew. "Ah, now these are faces I trust," Samuel Cavalier said with a rare smile. Tom Hill chuckled and joined Nathaniel, shaking the old man's hand. Andrew dropped the food basket Miss Jonas had packed on the side table, giving Samuel Cavalier a polite nod of acknowledgement. "How are you, Sean?" Tom Hill asked. The younger man nodded in response, the tension in the room palpable. "Thank you, Dr. Sterling," Nathaniel said firmly, his voice tinged with a note of dismissal. "Dr. Rowan is on his way back," Andrew added. Dr. Sterling nodded in acknowledgement and excused herself, leaving the room. Like before, Samuel Cavalier remained silent for about 2 minutes before gesturing to the sealed envelopes Nathaniel had placed on a side table. "Could you please help me with that, Tom?" he asked. Tom picked up the envelopes and took them to Samuel, but when he made to hand them over, the older man shook his head. "You're going to hold on to those, Tom. From now on, you're acting as my lawyer, and my son's," Samuel said. Nathaniel's brows furrowed, mirroring Tom Hill's and every other man in the room. Tom knew that Samuel Cavalier had 3 sons and 1 daughter, Dominic, who was dead, and the 3rd son who died alongside his mother. The other living son was Henri Cavalier, and then there was the daughter, Anne Cavalier. So who was Samuel referring to? Tom shared a look with Nathaniel. "Sean, when your mother wanted to leave the family and asked Henri for a divorce, it wasn't because she was no longer comfortable being a Camorra. On the contrary, she enjoyed the protection and power it gave her to be one of us. Your mother and I were good friends. She was the very best daughter-in-law one could ever imagine. She was beautiful, smart, protective, and loyal. And we lived in a morally grey world where sometimes you feel invisible. You remember, Tom, that Henri was in the same accident that took his mother and brother from me?" Samuel Cavalier rasped. "Yes, I do remember," Tom Hill replied, his mind already drawing conclusions. He looked at Nathaniel, who seemed to be solving the puzzle in his head, judging by the pensive frown and the quick dart of his glance in Sean Cavalier's direction. Tom imitated the act and watched Sean sitting there in the wheelchair, his jaw clenched and fists tightened. Tom wondered if he had pieced the puzzle together too. "The doctor told me that Henri would never be able to father a child," Samuel Cavalier was saying. "What?" Sean exclaimed, sitting up and almost getting out of the wheelchair. "Are you saying I am not a Camorra?" Sean asked in a tense tone. "No, Sean. He is saying he is your father," Tom Hill replied. Sean blanched, his eyes darting from Tom Hill to Samuel Cavalier. "What?" he repeated, this time more forcefully. Although Henry didn't know then. "Your mother wanted to leave because she was scared he would find out. I tried to persuade her to stay, that I would protect her, but she didn't want to face the consequences of admitting we had an indiscretion," Samuel Cavalier said. "An indiscretion? You got your daughter-in-law pregnant?" Sean yelled, clearly agitated. "I know, Sean, and I'm not sorry. I am sorry that your mother died. I had to keep quiet and let it be because I had to choose either to make it obvious that it deeply affected me and kill my own son, your brother, and expose you to danger or even death. I chose to let you live a normal life. "Otherwise you will be dead, Sean," Samuel Cavalier declared. "So I'm supposed to be grateful that you let my mother, your lover, be killed to keep your lunatic children from killing me?" Sean growled. "Hey!" Samuel Cavalier yelled, making Sean shut up. "It's done. It's in the past. I can't go back and undo anything. Now I'm trying to keep your self-righteous ass alive," he yelled. Sean's chest heaved as he tried to contain his emotions. Anne found out somehow, and if I am right, she was waiting for Henri to be done with his cleanup and return, so she can use the information to break him. "Then turn you two against each other," Samuel Cavalier said. "No, he is not going to have some sibling squabble with him. He is going to kill him. He is going to hunt him down like a dog and kill him," Jake said, holding the older man's gaze. He couldn't begin to imagine what Sean must be feeling. Every time the poor guy thinks he's gotten past something, another thing hits him like a ton of bricks. "That's where you are wrong," Samuel Cavalier said as he turned to Tom Hill and then reverted his gaze to Sean. "These papers Tom Hill is holding are proof that you own everything. My property, my business, my legacy, everything," Samuel Cavalier rasped. Sean Cavalier let out a shaky sigh, his eyes glistening with tears. "You have no idea what you've done. You have doomed me," Sean rasped in evident anguish. "Have I? Or have I given you the power and the money to create a world you feel safe in?" Samuel Cavalier asked. Sean Cavalier's brows furrowed, his eyes darting as he tried to comprehend the older man's words. "I take it you have a video to back this up?" Tom Hill inquired. "Of course, Tom, and I sent the video to all of my associates and staff just before I approached Nate and his wife," Samuel Cavalier said. Nathaniel let out a curse. "You won't be making keeping you alive easy, Uncle Sam," Nathaniel said. "Did your wife think I had a chance then?" the older man asked. Nathaniel didn't quite know how to reply to that. "A chance? What chance?" Sean interjected, his eyes bouncing from Samuel Cavalier to Nathaniel. "I'm dying, Sean. I'm afraid there is no time to dwell on your decision. As we speak, every Camorra knows you are in charge. I have disowned Henri. He has no power to wield, but I know he will try." Sean sank into the wheelchair. Please tell me Dr. Hawthorne can save him," Sean directed at Nathaniel. Nathaniel paused as every eye turned to him, Ariana's words about the medical file replaying in his head. "I think we should give Dr. Rowan and Aria time to run their own tests and come to their own conclusions. Also," Nathaniel paused, glancing at Tom Hill before reverting his gaze to Samuel Cavalier. "There's this drug produced by Farmer Hawthorne. I started working on it when I had a cancer scare 2 years ago," he added, telling a half-lie. His issue with cancer was never made public, and although he had an arrangement with Samuel Cavalier, he still would not be so trusting in front of the two Camorras. And this botanical-based pharmaceutical targets immune function compromised by oncogenic factors, bolstering the body's immunological defenses. The initial drug has shown significant efficacy. Building on this success, I have embarked on developing a derivative compound tailored for brain tumors, engineered to traverse the blood-brain barrier. This drug aims to mitigate tumor progression by enhancing immune surveillance within the central nervous system. Currently, it's undergoing testing stages, and I've just reviewed the preliminary findings for the Phase 1 tests from our office files this morning," he explained. "Are you saying that your new drug could help me, Nate?" Samuel Cavalier asked with keen interest. "I'm saying that if the doctors determine your tumor is too advanced for surgery, we could use the herbal drug to repair your immune system compromised by cancer, enabling your body to better defend itself. It might shrink the tumor enough for the doctors to proceed with treatment," Nathaniel replied. "That sounds promising," Sean Cavalier said, hope gleaming in his eyes. Nathaniel could now see the uncanny similarities between Samuel and Sean that he hadn't noticed before. With Samuel Cavalier known as his grandfather, no one would have guessed that the resemblance was more complicated than a simple genetic conclusion. They both had the same build and facial structure, except for their eye color, which Nathaniel guessed Sean must have inherited from his mother. "May I begin taking this medication?" Samuel inquired with enthusiasm. "I'll need my wife's approval first if she agrees at all," Nathaniel responded. "Why wouldn't she agree?" Samuel asked. As I mentioned, the drug is currently in the testing phase, Uncle Sam. We've completed preclinical research and filed an investigational new drug application for clinical trials. These trials progress through phases. Phase 1 tests safety in a small group of healthy volunteers. Phase 2 evaluates efficacy in patients with the condition, and Phase 3 verifies these findings in larger trials. Upon successful completion, we'll submit a new drug application for regulatory approval. It's a meticulous process to ensure both safety and effectiveness before widespread use. Using it for you now would bypass protocol, and she may not be willing to take that risk, he explained. The older man shrugged. Either way, I'll likely die, he stated. Well, my wife is exceptionally cautious when it comes to her patients, Nathaniel remarked knowingly. Despite the success of his cancer drug invention, she still hadn't approved it for his use, even after several months of recorded success. He smiled to himself, feeling deeply touched by her care and protection towards him. Samuel chuckled. I'm looking forward to meeting this much-talked-about woman, Samuel said. It's typical of you to marry someone with beauty and brains, he added. She's also incredibly scary, Tom Hill said with a deep comical frown, making Nathaniel, Jake, Sean, Aidan and Andrew laugh. I've seen that firsthand, Sean said. Henry stabbed me and brought me here for treatment. He threatened her, and she said, are you going to shut up and let me save him, or continue to be an arse? Sean shook his head. Samuel chuckled. Henri was brandishing a gun at her, he added incredulously. A woman like that, I believe you, Tom, he said. Nate lowered his gaze, smiling to himself, his heart swelling with pride and fear from the near-death experience. He sighed deeply. When will Dr. Hawthorne come to see him? Sean asked. Nathaniel raised his head and paused for a minute before saying, we were planning not to let her know who her anonymous patient was who sent her the medical files so as not to put her under undue pressure, but now I think we kind of have to. And if I know my wife well, she would likely want to see you tonight. But forgive me, she needs rest. She's over 5 months pregnant with twins. I'll tell her about you in the morning, Uncle Sam, and come with her for her ward round. Rowan should be here too. If anything can be done, we will do it. I promise, Nathaniel delivered. Samuel Cavalier nodded in acknowledgement. After a few minutes, during which Aidan helped Samuel Cavalier move his food onto the overbed table and pushed it over his outstretched legs, they stayed while the old man ate. Once he had settled back in bed, they prepared to leave. Nathaniel assisted Samuel in placing his gun, knife, and money under the hospital bed. When their eyes met, Nathaniel said, I'll have Jake bring new clothes for you tomorrow. The older man nodded gratefully. I'll store these documents in a safe place and notify the Italian Registry of Wills, Tom Hill said, glancing from Samuel to Sean Cavalier. Samuel directed his gaze at Sean, watching as he gave Tom Hill a curt nod. Tom Hill watched as Samuel Cavalier reached for his phone and said, Let me have your phone number and email, Tom, so I can send you the video proof you need. Tom promptly gave him his contact information, and soon enough his phone chimed with a message. As Nathaniel and the rest of the team headed to the exit door, Sean asked, What about security? Nathaniel looked back at him over his shoulder and said, He is under my protection now. Samuel Cavalier grinned smugly. Sean nodded in understanding. As they reached the exit door of the hospital, Nathaniel noticed that, aside from the hospital security, Andrew had planted a few Hawthorne guards inside as well. When Andrew opened the jeep door for Nathaniel and Tom, he said, Dr. Hawthorne asked me about Samuel Cavalier. I told her it's best we wait for you to explain. Nathaniel nodded in approval. I suppose I just need to either find a way to distract her from the answer until tomorrow, or hope she's asleep when we get home, he said. They all settled into the car, and it started moving. Tom Hill plugged his ears with wireless earphones and began listening to Samuel Cavalier's video message. Soon enough, they arrived at the house. Nathaniel and Tom got out and went inside. Nathaniel found Alex and Ethan in the living room watching TV. The two stood up as soon as he walked in, their faces etched with worry. Is everything okay, Nate? Ethan asked with concern. Yes, brother, everything is fine. Just an old friend using old-school methods to get to me for protection, Nathaniel responded, shaking Alex's and Ethan's hands. Geez, that was intense. We've been trying to figure out who the man could be. Alex added. Nathaniel chuckled. Just an old friend of the family, Nathaniel said. But is he all right now? Ethan asked, his brows furrowed. We've taken him somewhere safe for now. Where are Anna and Aria? Nathaniel responded, changing the subject. Aria went to bed. We noticed her legs were a tad swollen, so Anna made her retire. Anna has gone to bed too. I suppose their day has been quite exhausting, Alex said. But she is fine, Ethan quickly added when he saw Nathaniel's concerned frown. All right, give me a minute to check on her, shower and change, then I'll join you, Nathaniel said, hurrying away. Upon reaching his room, Nathaniel saw Aria asleep in bed. He wanted to check her leg, but didn't want to touch her without cleaning up first. He quickly discarded his clothes and took a shower. Afterward, wearing only his boxers, he knelt at the foot of the bed and gently peeled back the cover over Aria's legs. He could see that her feet were indeed swollen, though they weren't prominent. He gently stroked her feet before lowering his head to press a kiss on them. Nathan, Aria called softly. Nathaniel got into bed with her and gathered her into his arms, pressing a kiss on her forehead. I told you not to overdo things, Ariana. You are carrying 2 babies, my love. You need to slow down, Nathaniel gently admonished. Aria sighed and burrowed deeper into his arms. I will. I'm sorry, Aria whispered softly. I'm happy you're back, she added. What about the homeless guy? Who is he, Nathan? Aria pressed. No, Ariana, rest. We will talk about that in the morning, Nathaniel interrupted firmly. But Aria began, seeking answers, but Nathaniel cut her off. I said no, baby, not now, he insisted, his tone resolute. Aria let out a resigned sigh, and Nathaniel made her rest her head against his chest, wrapping his arms around her as he slowly ran his fingers through her hair, caressing her scalp. Oh, that feels good, Aria moaned softly. Nathaniel tilted her head back and watched as she opened her eyes before lowering his head to kiss her. Much later, when she'd fallen back asleep, he carefully disentangled himself from her embrace, threw something on, and exited the room with the intent of joining Alex and Ethan downstairs. He was just about to exit the elevator when his phone rang. He picked it up immediately when he saw the caller ID. Hello, Peter. I hope all is well that you're calling me this late, Nathaniel asked with furrowed brows. Oh, yes, sir. Everything is fine. I just wanted to let you know that my staff and I are available for anything you need. We could even set up a small service branch opposite your estate if you like, or even a self-service center. We're here for you 24/7, Peter rambled on. Also, the Platinum MasterCards you requested for Master Liam and Master Owen are ready. I will personally bring them to your office first thing in the morning, sir. Nathaniel's brows furrowed. Peter Nelson was the branch manager of the New York branch where they banked, and although Nathaniel understood why Peter might be terrified of losing him as a customer, he still wished the man wouldn't call at odd hours to remind him he was one of his most prominent customers. Okay, Peter, thanks for calling, he said, and ended the call before the man could say more. Nathaniel noticed Tom Hill coming down the stairs speaking on the phone. Spotting Nathaniel, Tom quickly ended the call and hurried down. Almost simultaneously, Andrew and Aidan emerged from the kitchen, followed by Jake and Charles. The 4 men appeared puzzled as they approached Tom Hill and Nathaniel. Sensing something amiss, Nathaniel paused. What's the emergency, Mr. Hill? Andrew asked, sounding bemused. His brows furrowed and his eyes darted between Nathaniel and Tom. What's going on, Tom? Nathaniel inquired. I think we should talk in your study, Nate, Tom said, his voice hesitant. Nathaniel nodded and led the way to his study. Once inside the study, all the men gathered and Nathaniel positioned himself behind his desk, facing the 5 men. Remember when Samuel Cavalier said he gave Sean everything he owned? Tom Hill began, his voice tense. Yes, Nathaniel prompted. Well, he meant everything that he, Samuel Cavalier, owned, not what the Camorra is worth, Tom explained. Nathaniel gave him a confused stare. If you get straight to the point, Tom, I might understand you better, Nathaniel snapped unintentionally, growing impatient with the suspense. Your grandfather apparently gave the Camorra a working loan in the form of an investment. Samuel Cavalier is now returning that money with interest, on the basis that when he dies, there's no guarantee his offspring will continue the pact on which the loan was founded. He divided the Camorra's wealth and promptly returned your grandfather's money after making this knowledge public to his inner circle, Tom elaborated. Nathaniel picked up the phone he had left on the table and checked the trust fund for the Hawthorne family. It suddenly made sense why Peter had called him sounding frantic. Nathaniel let out a sharp breath when he saw the lump sum that had been deposited into the Hawthornes' account. Without a doubt, Nathaniel could see they were now the wealthiest family globally. He slowly sat down. The money came in under the guise of an accrued trust for Liam and Owen Hawthorne. His 5-year-old sons were now trillionaires. He deposited it under Liam and Owen's names as an accrued trust fund spanning over decades, Nathaniel announced. Henry is not going to take this lying down, Andrew declared firmly. Nathaniel let out a sigh, rubbing his face and using his hands to brush back his hair, running his fingers through it. I was hoping for a somewhat normal life for my boys and my woman, he remarked wearily. Are we still picking up Henry? Jake asked. I really doubt he would choose to be a sitting duck, Jake, but we can try. With what Samuel just did, he's going to be on the run and vengeful. At least Anne Cavalier was given the vineyard in Nepal with a one-off lump sum. Henry was put at Sean's mercy. We really need to beef up security, not just for Nathaniel and Dr. Hawthorne, but for Liam and Owen, Tom Hill supplied. We need to strategize, Nathaniel began, placing his phone on the table and crossing his arms. I must try to assist Samuel Cavalier. We can't abandon him, especially since he doesn't intend to kill his own son, and I refuse to do it for him. Keeping Samuel alive is crucial. He can help maintain peace, particularly now. If returning my grandfather's money ends the family pact, we must ensure our protection. However, I refuse to shoulder the blame for Henry's death. I don't want Samuel to ever think that I killed his son. So what's our next move? What if he leaves us no choice, boss? Aidan inquired. If it comes to that, my hands will be tied. After all this was his fault. He fucked around and got bitten in the arse. But we need a solid plan. I won't risk that madman being near my family, Nathaniel declared firmly. After the meeting with Nathaniel, Jake, Aidan, Andrew, and Charles filed out of his study, each man lost in his own thoughts. Andrew was worried about Anita staying on Madison Avenue, away from the Hawthorne household, which was about to be turned into a fortress. Aidan had similar concerns about Noria, but wondered if it might be best to separate her from the Hawthornes. He thought that if there was no link between her, him, and the Hawthornes, Henri would not be able to use her as a scapegoat. Jake's dilemma was far worse. He was afraid of what he might have dragged Christine into, and wondered if it wasn't too late to pull back. This would mean deliberately hurting her to keep her away, as he couldn't tell her the truth about what was happening. Even if he could, any sensible woman would run away screaming from him in the situation. But she knew what you do for a living, he reminded himself. It wouldn't matter if it puts her in danger, he quietly argued with himself. The next few days were going to be quite intense, and it was best not to risk her life. Then there was Julia, or Giselle. Jake wondered if it was possible for Henri to find out that her death was a fluke. Tracing her to kill her to send a message was also possible. Jake's fists clenched by his sides as he worked his jaw at the very thought. Nathaniel Hawthorne was right. Both Samuel Cavalier and Sean Cavalier did not want to deal with the problem Henri Cavalier posed. They wanted to ignore what he was capable of and expected Henri to either fade into nothingness or for someone else to clean up their mess now that Henri had gone out of hand. Samuel Cavalier, who was expected to deal with him, was seriously sick and counting on the goodwill of the Hawthornes' forebears to keep him alive. This meant they would be stretched thin if they decided to play along. Jake loved Nathaniel's plan, but would have preferred hunting down the bastard and feeding him to the dogs. As for his sister, all they needed to do was keep an eye on the witch. If she got out of hand, she would follow her brother, problem solved. Jake understood that this would create a whole new generation of enemies, but right then, he didn't care. Which was why it was a good thing he wasn't the one calling the shots. Because if he were in charge, a lot of people would be going swimming with the fishes. Case closed. I think it is best we speak with Dr. Hawthorne about bringing the ladies back here from Madison Avenue. I really don't think it's best if our attention is divided into 4 right now, Charles spoke, voicing Andrew's thoughts aloud. Funny, I was thinking the same thing, Andrew said. Do you think, boss, we let Noria stay here? Aidan asked. I was thinking we should get her a place, help get her a job and let her go, Aidan added. The other 3 men turned to look at him, giving him a searching gaze. "What?" he asked, a tad irritated at the probing stares. "You would feel comfortable doing that?" Andrew asked. Aidan shrugged and replied, "We are just trying to help the girl. It wouldn't do if she inadvertently causes a security breach or gets killed for associating with us," Aidan explained. Andrew nodded in understanding. "I was going to say we let her stay in the guards' quarters and limit her roaming to that wing," Charles said. "I mean, we have ensuite rooms with kitchenettes we just don't use," Charles added. "Speak for yourself. Sometimes I cook for myself," Jake protested, making Charles chuckle. "Yeah, you do, buddy," he scoffed. Jake's brows furrowed. "I'm serious," Jake insisted. Aidan's brows furrowed into a pensive frown as he tuned out the other men's light banter, remembering that there were indeed staff on the Hawthorne estate who never went near the Hawthornes' main building. They were mainly gardeners, farmers, and pickers who worked in the homegrown produce greenhouse that the late Mrs. Hawthorne had set up in the north wing of the estate. Their movements were limited to the servants' quarters and their area of work. They prepared their own meals while the Hawthornes made sure they had adequate provisions and supplies. "You should cook us dinner sometime soon then," Andrew said. Both Charles and Andrew continued to tease Jake, who now looked annoyed. "Can we get her a job in the greenhouse instead of just keeping her locked up in our quarters?" Aidan asked, interrupting the other men and drawing their attention. Andrew thought about it for a minute, and Aidan could almost see him reaching the same conclusion as he did. "I will talk to her about the protocol and keep an eye on her," Aidan quickly added. "Okay, but we need to tell Dr. Hawthorne and let Miss Jonas know to give her a try," Andrew responded. Aidan let out a relieved sigh. At least this way she would be safe, and it seemed like Dr. Hawthorne and Anita liked Noria, so he was fairly certain they would support her staying. "Is there still going to be a party on Madison Avenue tomorrow?" Charles asked. Meanwhile, Nathaniel had joined Alex and Ethan in the living room, where they continued to watch sports while Miss Jonas brought them late-night snacks. Nathaniel was a bit distracted but tried to be physically present for his friends, knowing once they returned to their lives, it might be a while before he saw them again. He was slightly concerned about their association with him, but he knew if his plans for Henri worked out, it wouldn't be an issue. He needed to ensure their lives weren't disrupted because of that bastard. He couldn't afford to seem weak and on the defensive. This was definitely not a good time for this nonsense. Aria's due date was slowly approaching, and according to his research, twins are often born around 36-37 weeks, with most not reaching the full term of 40 weeks. He did the mental calculation, realizing Aria was nearly 6 months along. This was a crucial time for her to rest and be completely stress-free, and the issues with the Comoras certainly weren't screaming stress-free. On top of that, he'd promised his sons they would go school hunting so they could join their peers in regular school. Nathaniel wasn't aware he'd started to shake his legs in agitation steadily, tapping one foot on the marble flooring with his hands laid flat over his thighs, his anxiety palpable. "Is everything okay, Nate?" Alex inquired with concern. Nathaniel looked up and saw that both Alex and Ethan were watching him with worried gaze. "Everything is fine, I'm just thinking of Aria. She's getting close to her due date," he replied, telling a half-truth. "Did she say how the boy's birth went? Did she have them naturally or through an operation?" Alex asked. Nathaniel's brows furrowed as he realized they had never talked about that. But he knew that if she had given birth via cesarean section, she would have a scar on her stomach, and there was none. "It was a regular birth," he replied, making a mental note to discuss the subject with Aria, wanting to know the full details just to be prepared. "I heard the first time is usually the hardest. I have no idea, though. But don't worry, she will be fine," Ethan tried to reassure him. Nathaniel nodded in acknowledgement. "And we will be here for you, brother," Alex added, making Nathaniel smile. He nodded again in acknowledgement. Nathaniel didn't get upstairs until 12 a.m. Upon reaching the room, he checked Aria's legs again and, seeing they were pretty much the same, picked up a pillow to prop her feet. After making sure she was comfortable, he got into bed with her, curling himself against her back and wrapping her in a warm embrace. At the Hawthorne Security House complex, Aidan walked into his apartment, carrying the shopping bags containing the clothing Dr. Hawthorne had purchased for Noria. The living room was dimly lit, with the only light coming from a standing lamp next to a 3-seater leather chair. Noria was curled up on the chair in a fetal position, her head resting on a throw pillow. Aidan entered the room and placed her packages on a single-seater in a corner. The luxurious scent of high-end clothing, mixing with his masculine cologne, filling the air. Aidan headed to the bathroom, undressed and stared at himself in the mirror, trying to convince himself that his protective feelings for Noria were normal given her situation. Living in the same space with her instead of sending her to the servants' quarters shouldn't be a problem. It would be like having a younger sister around. For some reason, the sexy image of her emerging from the boutique earlier played in his mind. "She's 18, you fucking weirdo. Get your mind out of the gutter." He scolded himself under his breath and then headed to the shower stall to take his bath. Aidan had never had anyone come over to his apartment, even though he was aware a few others did it. He was used to sleeping alone in the nude, and now he would have to be extra conscious of his behavior. He rummaged through his wardrobe for pajamas, finding a pair still in the package, emitting the scent of new clothes. He put them on and returned to the living room, intending to wake Noria so she could sleep on the bed in the room while he made a makeshift bed on the floor in the living room. Standing by the chair, he could hear her soft breathing, indicating she was in a deep sleep. He decided not to wake her then. Carefully, he lifted her and carried her bridal style to the bedroom, gently placing her on the bed. Suddenly, she awoke with a start, letting out a loud, banshee-like scream. The piercing sound echoed through the room before Aidan instinctively covered her mouth with his hand. His brows furrowed as he saw her trembling in fear, her eyes wide and her hands raised defensively. "Hey, it's me. I'm just trying to make you comfortable," he whispered urgently. Noria's chest heaved with labored breaths before recognition dawned in her eyes. Her eyelids fluttered, brows furrowed, then her eyes widened in shock and embarrassment. "I'm going to let you go now. Please do not scream," Aidan said in a calm, soothing tone. Noria nodded in acknowledgement, and he slowly withdrew his hand, watching as she swallowed softly and nervously licked her lips. Aidan didn't miss the act, but averted his gaze and stepped back from the bed. "I'm sorry, I didn't know it was you. I forgot where I was. I'm sorry, Aidan," she pleaded softly, her voice filled with embarrassment. "It's okay, Noria, you don't have to explain. I grew up in an orphanage. I understand that kind of trauma. Don't worry about it and try to get some sleep," Aidan replied calmly. "Get some sleep? Am I staying here? Wasn't I supposed to go back to Madison Avenue with Miss Anita? Oh my God, did I oversleep?" she asked anxiously. "You didn't oversleep. There's just been a slight change in plans, and Miss Anita is still here too," Aidan reassured her, unsure how to explain the situation just yet. "Can we talk about this in the morning? I really need to get some rest while I can," he added. Noria nodded gingerly. "Thank you," she murmured, as he gathered 2 duvets and a pillow and headed out of the room. "Where are you going?" she asked in agitation, her voice rising slightly. "To sleep in the living room," he replied firmly. "Oh, but the bed is big enough for both of us to share. I really wouldn't want to put you out," she quickly added. "I don't think that's a good idea, Noria. Good night," he said firmly, and walked out. Confusing emotions about her were churning inside him, and the last thing he needed was to share a bed with her and give room for further complications. In Jake's room, he paced the length of his bed, debating whether to call off his plans with Christine or allow them to have one last night together at least. He craved companionship and questioned if his hesitations stemmed from pure selfishness. Glancing at the time, he considered informing her, but dismissed the idea as soon as it formed. He was fairly certain she wouldn't appreciate a late-night call that would scare her half to death and break her heart simultaneously, so he resolved to wait until morning. He cast a regretful glance at the package containing the dress, shoes, and bag he had purchased for her. Perhaps he would have to send it to her later. He could only hope that she would not be too angry with him. Meanwhile, in the Hawthornes' main building, Andrew was delighted to have Anita with him again. The two of them organized the shopping, keeping Aria's purchases near the entrance of the bedroom door, so Andrew would remember to take them upstairs first thing in the morning. The recipes needed for the special soup they had planned for the engagement party were handed to Miss Jonas for safekeeping. None of them were sure what Nathaniel's decision would be regarding the party, but Andrew was confident there was an obvious solution, if Nathaniel was ready to open himself up to it. The following morning, Aria woke to the aromatic smell of breakfast. She initially thought it was just her imagination, and she stretched on the bed with a smile. "Good morning, baby." Nathaniel's deep baritone made her smile widen. Opening her eyes, she noted that he wasn't in bed with her. Instead, he was fully dressed and placing a tray on the chest of drawers at the foot of the bed. "Oh, am I getting breakfast in bed?" she cooed girlishly with delight, clapping her hands together. Nathaniel chuckled. "Let's call it the first course," he said as he came to help her up, pressing a searing kiss to her lips before propping pillows behind her back to make her comfortable. He then brought the stainless tray laden with food and placed it on her outstretched legs. Joining her in bed, he took a seat by her side, kissed her again, and started to feed her. Arya couldn't stop smiling. "This is a delightful surprise," she said. "Uh-huh," Nathaniel responded, using a fork to pick out eggs with sausages to feed her. "Why do I get the feeling you're buttering me up for something?" she quipped, making him chuckle. "What makes you think I'm buttering you up and not just doing this for myself?" he asked with a raised eyebrow. Arya gave him a seriously look. "Considering I'm the one getting served in bed, I'd say not a chance, sir," she replied with a bit of sass. Nathaniel chuckled softly. "Eat up, there's something I want you to see," he said, and Arya could sense a note of seriousness in his words. She gave him a searching gaze and nodded. Afterward, the two left the suite and headed towards the elevator. But instead of going inside, Nathaniel manually opened a double door at the far end of the same wall. To her surprise, Arya found out it was another elevator. She had always thought it was a storeroom or a place for cleaning supplies. There was only one button on the side panel, and Nathaniel pressed it, bringing the elevator to life. He raised their interlaced hands and kissed the back of her hand. She wanted to ask where they were going, but could feel the tension in his body and knew it was best to let him lead. Shortly after, the elevator arrived at a stop and opened up to an amazing view of a pool with a glass cover on the patio of an expansive suite visible through glass walls. Before he spoke, Arya immediately knew this was his parents' wing of the house. She turned to him, giving him a keen scrutiny as he stared ahead, his eyes gleaming with emotions, as if lost in a swirl of memories. "My love," Arya called softly, making him blink and snapping him out of whatever was tormenting him. Nathaniel turned to look into her eyes, giving her a searching gaze. His eyes were dark and intense as he rasped, "You can have your rooftop party here." "I dare say it's far more beautiful," the corner of his lips quirking into a semblance of a smile. "Darling," Arya whispered, reaching up to cup his jaw. "This was your parents, right?" she asked. He nodded. "You haven't been here since they died?" she probed. Nathaniel nodded again. "I couldn't," he replied, his voice gruff and faint. "I had so much to do. My father's shoes seemed too big to fill, and I had to fill them fast. I allowed it to swallow me whole, along with my grief. It was the only way I could cope," he confessed. "Oh, my darling," Arya said, drawing him into a hug. Nathaniel held on to her, burrowing his face in the nook of her neck. "I'm sorry I wasn't here to be your rock, to be the one you turn to for strength and courage when things get overwhelming. I'm sorry I wasn't by your side at the end of the day when the curtains closed, to hold you and reassure you that you are not alone," Arya whispered with emotion, making Nathaniel quite emotional. His arms tightened around her in reflex, his heart swelling with love for her. "I'm sorry too, my love. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you when you lost your dad and then had our babies," Nathaniel whispered against her skin, sounding choked up with emotions. "We are together now. We can heal together," Arya replied, her voice soft and soothing as she slowly stroked her fingers through his hair. "Why are we changing the venue for the engagement dinner, though, my love? Does this have to do with the sudden appearance of the homeless guy? What am I missing?" "Talk to me," Arya probed with concern. "Come," Nathaniel invited, urging her to a lounger. "You will have all your answers shortly," he added. Arya gave Nathaniel a searching gaze before he got on the lounger and pulled her atop him, making her sit between his legs and rest her back against his front. He wrapped his arms around her, taking her hands to interlace his fingers with hers and gently stroking her hands. When he spoke, she could feel the rumbling of his chest against her back, his deep, soothing tone enveloping her. To answer your question, yes, the change in the engagement party venue has something to do with the old man who pretended to be homeless to get my attention, Nathaniel started. Ah, he is not homeless, Arya responded, her voice tinged with a mix of curiosity and resignation. No, babe, he is not. He is an old associate of my grandfather, a very wealthy organized crime boss in Italy. Nathaniel continued answering her questions, but she interjected. Organized crime? Nathaniel, what? She started to say, sitting up to crane her body so she could look into his eyes, but Nathaniel shushed her. I need you to listen to me, Ariana. This is very important, Nathaniel urged, giving her a keen scrutiny. Arya gingerly nodded, her heart racing with apprehension of what he might disclose. Was Nathaniel trying to tell her his family was involved with the mafia? I don't know why my grandfather decided to do business with this crime family, or what the business was about, but I know my grandfather loaned the family a lot of money. When my father died, I saw a leather-bound folder in his study. Opening it, I saw a list of names of families you would not believe if I started to mention them, listed in this diary with lump sums of money written beside the names. There are signatures and dates clearly written there. This particular man's family name was number 10 in that diary. There was also a mention of a pact, whereby this family cannot be actively involved in going against the Hawthornes. Why this was done, I have no idea. My father honored the pact. How do I know this? That man from yesterday has been in our house, dined with my family, bought me gifts, and I call him Uncle Sam. His name, Ariana, is Samuel Cavalier, Nathaniel revealed, and he watched as Arya's eyes gleamed with recognition. Samuel Cavalier, the same Cavalier we know, Arya said in a voice as low as a whisper, as if saying the name aloud would invoke some thunderclap. Yes, my love, the same Cavalier we know. He is Henri Cavalier's father, Nathaniel reaffirmed. And Sean's grandfather, Arya said with a sigh, her brows furrowing. Babe, about that. We found out yesterday that Henri is actually Sean Cavalier's brother, Nathaniel supplied. What do you mean by that, I thought she started to say, but paused at the subtle tweak at the corner of Nathaniel's lips. No, she said in a whisper, her eyes widening as the meaning sunk in. That's just... wow! I know that Henri Guy is a terrible human being, but my God, that must be crushing, Arya said, then paused as the groove between her brows deepened. Do you think that was why he stabbed him? Arya asked with concern. Does that mean Sean is in trouble? She added, her agitation growing. I don't think Henri knew at that time that Sean was not his son. Otherwise, I'm pretty sure he would have killed him, Nathaniel replied matter-of-factly. Arya gasped with horror. You really think he would have killed his own blood? Arya inquired with concern. Henri desires to assume full control of his family's dynasty, which is currently not possible while his father, Samuel Cavalier, is still alive. Which brings me to the medical report you received anonymously, Nathaniel said, holding her gaze. Arya's eyes darted hurriedly in their sockets. Don't tell me that was for the old man, Arya probed with keen interest. It was, babe. He sent it himself on his way out of Italy. He had to escape to get to me undetected, hence why he pretended to be homeless. Henri Cavalier wants him dead, and his sister Anne knows and kept quiet because she found out about Sean. Henri deliberately manipulated Samuel's medical checkup reports to hide the fact that he was sick and made certain he got worse, without detection. Anne knew and didn't say a thing. He came to us to see if we could help, and, as a result of the crisis in his family, returned the accrued sum of the money my grandfather gave his family, Nathaniel said, giving her a meaningful look, hoping she was following his story and realizing where he was going with it without him spelling it out. His chest tightened with emotion when she said, We are in danger, aren't we, my love? Just like that time we helped Julia. Henri doesn't want us involved, and now that his father has messed up his plan, he is going to need someone to blame and will also come after his father. Arya met Nathaniel's gaze, wanting him to say her deductions were wrong, but the earnest gaze said otherwise. Henri sent a message to me on the ship on our way from Hawaii, telling us not to try and help his father or he would come after us. When we were in Manitoba, he did send his men to attack us. Now that he knows the pact is no more, and that his father has come to me for protection and help, and also that Samuel Cavalier has willed his money, what's left of it, to Sean and Anne, he will try to get to me again. For that, my love, I have to protect you. Protect our family. There will be restrictions. I'm sorry, Ariana, he rasped, his eyes darting as he met her gaze. Aria let out a sigh as she raised her hand to cup the side of his jaw, peering into his eyes. I suppose this is part of being Mrs. Hawthorne, she quipped softly. I'm sorry, baby, Nathaniel responded, his gaze dark and intense. Well, none of this is your fault, but you need to stop hiding things from me. You can't keep things like this to yourself. Too much worrying, Nathan, can hurt your heart, she said, placing her hand on his chest. Nathaniel promptly placed his larger hand over hers. I did promise you together forever, and I kinda knew you were trouble right from the first day I set my eyes on you, she quipped. Nathaniel chuckled softly, his gaze unwavering. But I still fell in love with you regardless, she added. A lump formed in Nathaniel's throat. He pulled her in for a kiss, cupping the nape of her neck to draw her closer. When he stopped, she laid her head on his chest and he wrapped his arms around her. I suppose you want us to try and save the old man just to spite his prick of a son? Aria said. Nathaniel shook with laughter. I was thinking you could re-evaluate him to be certain the medical report is for real. Then draw your conclusion, Nathaniel replied. I will naturally do that, but if the report is correct, and we operate, I can't promise it will be successful, Nathan. Even if he's extremely lucky and doesn't end up brain dead or in a coma, he will not be the same again. Do you think he is willing to take that chance? Meanwhile, earlier on, around 4 a.m., Jake was woken up by a loud, insistent banging on the door. Come on, damn it! He stumbled out of bed naked, grabbed something to throw on, and hurried to the door to open it. He had drunk a considerable amount of alcohol earlier to get him to sleep and was still a tad groggy, but upon seeing Andrew by his door, fully dressed in combat gear, not just any gear, but the special fire-resistant suits the Hawthornes had made, Jake instantly grew alert. Evergreen Memorial, Andrew said simply. Jake let out a curse and hurried back to get properly dressed. A few minutes later, he was outside on the porch of the Hawthornes' main building with about 50 Hawthorne guards on patrol. I need Aiden, Jake, and Lewis. The rest of you know what to do, Andrew said as he put on his protective mask. Jake did the same, and along with Aiden, the three got inside a jeep, with Andrew settling behind the wheel. Take position and survey the perimeter. If you see anyone who doesn't belong here, send a fucking message. Go, 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 Charles announced in a low, menacing voice. What's the status? Aiden asked Andrew as he drove out of the Hawthorne estate. He still hadn't fully grasped what was happening, except for Andrew appearing at his door in full bomb squad gear. I got a call from the hospital. Someone dropped a bag at the emergency entrance. Unfortunately, one of the security men opened it and upon seeing what was in there, ran outside with the bag, but didn't get far enough to throw it. He is dead and the entrance of the emergency room is blown to bits, Andrew supplied. Shit, Aiden cursed under his breath. Was it a distraction? Jake asked, upset at losing one of their own, and dreading that this might just be the start of it. That's what I'm thinking. Anton and Rowan are on their way. I've called Captain to help us send in backup. The security men are sweeping the building for more explosives in case that one was a decoy for the main show, Andrew explained. He took the bait then, like the boss said he would, Aiden rasped. Yeah, well, we figured he would be going in to look for Sean and Samuel Cavalier, not blowing up my men, Andrew replied with evident frustration. Then he added, I finally found a woman worth taking the marital plunge with. I really, really want to have a couple of years with her, guys, without losing anyone. Let's be careful, Andrew rasped, his voice tinged with emotion. Jake took out his gun and started to load it. Aiden let out a sigh and settled back in his seat, recalling how Noria had reacted when she saw him fully dressed. He hadn't been surprised that the banging on the door had woken her. When she'd sat up, he'd say, Go back to sleep. I'm sorry we woke you. I work at odd hours too, trying to reassure her. She'd nodded, but before he left, she'd said, You promised to show me New York. Aiden's brows had furrowed at the statement. He'd momentarily wondered what sightseeing had to do with him going to work, but when he'd turned around to face her, giving her a puzzled look, he noticed her wringing her hands, the hard swallow, and how she shifted positions, unsure of how to sit. Her gaze had been downcast, but then she raised her piercing eyes to meet his and added, "So you must come back." Aidan felt his heart tighten with emotions. She'd caught him off guard, and his only response was to nod. It was funny how he'd faced danger all his life without thinking twice about the consequences, with no sense of self-preservation. Just the feeling of having nothing to lose. Fear hadn't been much of an issue, but now with Noria he had an attachment, someone who might start making him think twice before risking his life. Now he understood perfectly what Andrew meant, but he wasn't sure if that was a good thing. The last thing he needed was to be so entangled in such an attachment that fear and a sense of self-preservation would cause him to hesitate in taking risks when it was desperately needed, potentially endangering everyone else. "You're going soft, old man. Everyone dies in the end, remember?" Aidan quipped, making Andrew and Jake chuckle. Lewis threw him a side glance and the two fist-bumped. "Damn straight," Lewis muttered to himself. Upon reaching Evergreen Memorial, the place was swarming with both firemen and police. Jake and Andrew exchanged a glance. Uniformed men, a potential decoy for a killer. Jake felt an uneasy sense of dread, and Andrew's earlier words now seemed prophetic. He hated the feeling. Andrew, Jake, Aidan, and Lewis swiftly joined Captain's team to sweep the hospital for explosives, moving from one floor to the next. Andrew observed that none of the officers had ventured up to the private ward and wondered if they were aware of its existence. "Clear!" exclaimed the team leaders as they exited each ward and room. Andrew couldn't gauge how much time had passed, but by the time they returned to the ground floor, it was already 6:30 in the morning. The four gathered, discussing whether to ask Dr. Sterling to accompany them to the top floor to check on the patients there, when Aidan spotted someone peering out from the middle door on the left side of the hallway. He quickly looked away to avoid being noticed and stood up straight, clearing his throat. At that moment, Tyrone hurried down the hallway upon seeing them. He looked disheveled, as if he hadn't bathed in days. "Thank God you guys are here. What is going on?" Dr. Rowan said, looking distressed. "We can't afford something like this happening here," he added as he joined them. "Welcome back, Doctor. Don't worry, we've completed our sweep of all the floors and wards. There are no explosives. Your patients are safe," Andrew reassured him. "The emergency section, though," Dr. Rowan started to say, but Jake cut in. "If you have repair crews on standby, call them." "None of your staff were injured except ours," Jake interjected sharply. "Damn it, I'm sorry, I didn't know that. Wasn't there a doctor on the ground to assist him?" Dr. Rowan asked, concerned. "No one could help him, Doctor," Lewis replied. "I apologize, guys," Dr. Rowan responded sincerely. "We haven't checked the private ward, though, the one on the uppermost floor." "You should get your key card and lead us there," Aidan said loudly. Jake, Andrew, and Lewis froze. They sensed something amiss. Otherwise, Aidan wouldn't be revealing such sensitive information aloud. Andrew, Jake, and Lewis exchanged glances and locked eyes with Aidan, who nodded in confirmation. Jake clenched his jaw. "If nobody has gone up there, there's no way anyone would be able to, but we can't be too careful. Come with me, gentlemen," Dr. Rowan invited, moving past the men to lead them down the hallway, then turning right towards the elevator. But Aidan immediately grabbed his arm and pressed him against the wall, drawing his gun. "Get inside the elevator now! Move!" Aidan commanded through gritted teeth, his voice firm and low. Dr. Rowan looked alarmed and confused, but complied quickly. "How many are there?" Jake whispered to Aidan. "No idea, but they were in the room to the left in the middle," Aidan replied in a hushed tone. "We're exposed here," Lewis pointed out. They all glanced towards the elevator and noticed the hallway ending in a T-shape. They split up quickly, with Jake and Aidan on one side and Andrew and Lewis on the other. Two nurses approached Andrew and Lewis's side of the hallway and froze upon seeing the men. Andrew gestured for them to retreat and they hurried back the way they came. Aidan focused his attention on the hallway leading to the elevator, his ears tuned to the approaching footsteps. Jake kept an eye on the elevator and noticed that while the red light indicated it was ascending, it didn't specify which floor. He appreciated the cleverness, but also understood it could be a deadly trap in an emergency, as no one would think to search for an invisible floor. When the hurried footsteps drew near, Aidan gripped his gun tightly, locking eyes with Andrew, who nodded in silent agreement. They mentally counted to 3 before stepping into view of the approaching men. "Stop or you die," Aidan yelled. Jake emerged from behind him and spotted about 6 armed, masked men in full combat gear, 3 of them carrying black bags that Jake suspected were filled with explosives. "You first," the leader among them retorted, raising his gun to fire. In response, Jake, Andrew, Lewis, and Aidan aimed their weapons at the heads of the visible targets and opened fire. One of the men at the back pulled out an explosive and lobbed it in their direction. The 4 took cover as the grenade landed at the foot of the elevator and exploded, causing extensive damage to the doors, walls, and ceiling. "Don't let them escape," Andrew shouted. Aidan grimaced as the pain from where a bullet had struck him spread across his chest. "Are you okay?" Jake asked urgently. Aidan nodded, adjusting his bulletproof vest. Jake helped him to his feet, and the 4 pursued the remaining 2 assailants, leaving the incapacitated men, including one with a bag of explosives, lying on the ground. The 2 assailants dashed into an empty room, with Andrew, Jake, Aidan, and Lewis framing the doorway. More of the Hawthorne guards arrived. "There's nowhere to run. Surrender!" Andrew yelled, wincing from the pain of a cut on his forehead, blood trickling down to his brow, which he quickly wiped away. "Come in and we'll bring this building down," one of the men threatened. "Okay then," Andrew replied coolly. A Hawthorne guard handed him 2 gas bombs. They all donned their masks as Andrew cautiously cracked open the door, and then got grazed in the hand by a bullet, causing him to grunt in pain, but he managed to toss the bombs inside before they all stepped back. Soon enough, behind the closed door, a fit of coughing filtered through. The men waited anxiously for about 5 minutes before kicking down the door. Aidan, leading the way, stepped in first, rubbing his sore chest absent-mindedly with Jake close behind. Jake's attention was caught by a red blinking light on the floor near one of the men. He swiftly grabbed Aidan's shoulder and shouted, "Aidan, wait!" Just before a deafening explosion shook the entire area. Meanwhile, back at the Hawthorne's residence, after Nathaniel finished explaining the Hawthorne pact to Aria, he guided her through the expansive suite, showcasing the 4 ensuite bedrooms, living room, kitchenettes, walk-in closet, and mini laundry. "It seems like this place was designed for the family," Aria commented. "It was," Nathaniel replied with a smile, taking her hand and leading her to his childhood room. He pushed open the door and ushered her inside. "This was my room until I turned 12. Then I wanted my own space. Even though my parents weren't always here, I craved independence. My dad was fine with it, but my mum wasn't quite ready for me to be an adult yet," he recalled. Aria smiled up at him, captivated by his stories and noticing how his eyes reflected both fond memories and some pain. For about 2 months after I moved downstairs, she would come to check on me while I was asleep, or pretending to be asleep, just to make sure her baby was okay, he continued, his voice trailing off. Aria hugged him sideways, still gazing up at him. That kind of put a damper on my plans because it meant I had an unspoken curfew. Wherever I was, I had to be home by the time I expected her to check, and she never missed, he joked fondly. "I'm pretty sure she knew you weren't really asleep," Aria teased. He chuckled. "So then at what point did you turn into a flirt?" she added with a straight face, making him laugh. "You're married to this flirt." "Ariana Hawthorne," he countered with a raised eyebrow. "My taste is not the topic here, sir," she shot back, sparking hearty laughter from him. "Well, I started dating at 16. I quickly realized that because of who I am, people tend to be insincere around me and believe me that it can be lonely. When you don't know who your true friends are and whom you can trust, you have to toughen up and face reality. If people want to be shallow, I might as well not take anything to heart." "You might think that made me into that nasty word you just called me," he said with a grin. Aria giggled and snuggled into his arms. Nathaniel continued, "But it saved me a lot of disappointment and heartbreak, so thank you very much." Aria pulled back, still laughing, and gently grasped his jaw, making him lower his face to hers as she kissed him. "You're lucky you're pregnant right now, baby," he murmured against her lips. "If I wasn't," Aria whispered, using her teeth to draw in his bottom lip before giving it a gentle bite. "What would you do?" she teased. With his broad chest heaving, Nathaniel's eyes darkened, and he swiftly turned her around to make her press her hands against the wall. Arya felt her heart pound against her chest. As Nathaniel lifted her dress and made her arch her back for him, their labored breaths filled the room with intensity. "Nathan!" Arya moaned in a soft, shaky breath as he cupped her throat with one hand and held her hip with the other. "You asked, Ariana," he replied in a deep, husky whisper. "If you weren't pregnant, it would be your back to the wall," he added with a deep growl. Downstairs at about 10 a.m., Liam entered his parents' room to look for them, hoping to ask if one of his uncles could accompany him and Owen to the mall to purchase engagement gifts for Uncle Andrew and Aunt Anita. Finding the room empty, he walked past the glass wall. His attention was quickly drawn to an approaching vehicle. Pausing, he observed Uncle Anton stepping out of the car and rushing to the back seat to open the door for a nice-looking lady with dark hair. Liam furrowed his brows in immediate recognition. "That's Uncle Jake's date from the ship," he mused aloud. "What could she be doing here?" he added, speaking to his pet robot, which moved to stand beside him, as if it could comprehend the situation. Liam watched as Uncle Charles approached the lady and then led her away, but not into the house. He murmured to himself, his eyes shifting to Uncle Anton. Perhaps he could convince him to take them quickly to the mall for the surprise gift for Uncle Andrew and Aunt Anita. Aunt Anita had been very kind to them, and he wanted to show her how much she was appreciated. He noticed another car pulling up behind Uncle Anton's, and a man in a black suit exited the vehicle. He resembled people who worked with his dad, leaving Liam wondering who he was. "There seems to be a lot happening down there for me to stay stuck up here. I'm going to head out," he said to the robot, then hurried back to his room. "Owen," he called out, wondering where his brother had disappeared to. "In here." Owen responded from the bathroom. Liam opened the door to peek inside, making Owen gasp. "Do you mind?" Owen snapped with irritation, clearly occupied with using the toilet and playing games on his phone simultaneously. "I can't find Mum and Dad. I'm going downstairs to look for them so someone can take us to the mall to get gifts for Uncle Andrew and Aunt Anita," Liam explained. "We can just order online, Liam," Owen said, his tone dripping with condescension. Liam shot him a glare. "I don't want to do that. I hate those what you order versus what you get scenarios," Liam snapped back. "Besides, I want to go to the mall and shop like normal people," he added. "Normal people order online, bro," Owen countered. "You're so annoying." "I don't know how I put up with you even before we were born," Liam replied. "Actually, according to Mum, we were in separate amniotic sacs, so we didn't have to deal with each other until birth," Owen said with a smirk. "I have a 3-word solution for you, buddy." "Vanishing twins syndrome," Liam retorted, making Owen gasp. "I should have absorbed you." "That would have saved me all this trouble," he added with a devilish smirk, wiping the annoying smile off Owen's face. "I'm still not going," Owen calmly replied. Liam growled and slammed the door shut. Now annoyed, Liam went to change his clothes, putting on all the necessary gadgets his dad always insisted they wear when leaving the house. Grabbing his mask, he headed out. "I can do this on my own," he muttered under his breath, clearly annoyed.